Okay, welcome. So, good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee, including those watching online. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices via the stairs, either through the security door to my right or opposite the lifts in the foyer. Please do not use the lifts. Please assemble in Hawley Square on the green, where officers will assist you and advise when it is deemed safe to return to the chamber. I would advise that if filming takes place, anyone in attendance in the public areas may have their image captured. This includes the official recording of the meeting. I urge anyone filming proceedings to avoid filming members of the public, particularly if there are children present. Can I ask, does anyone intend to film or record the meeting? No, thank you. Would everyone present please ensure their mobile phones are turned to silent and that they are not used to make or receive phone calls or messages in the chamber whilst this meeting is in progress. I have the following members who wish to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1. Councillor Crittenden. Do I have any other request to speak under Section 20.1? No, thank you. Oh, no, she's not a member of the committee. Oh, I actually know... Yes, I do, but she's not here. I also have Councillor Smith, but she's disappeared. And I don't quite know where she is. So hopefully she's going to return. I did go and just try and look for her. Oh, she's back. Right. Just announcing that you're speaking under Section 20.1, Councillor Smith. Would any other members who wish to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1 please announce it now? Okay, I have apologies from Councillor Makinson, substituted by Councillor J. Bright, and I have apologies from Councillor Paul Moore, no substitute. Are there any other apologies? Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Orban and Councillor K. Bright, I think you both are announcing for the same things, but Councillor Orban, please start.
Yeah, Chair, it's, I declare an interest in items 4A, B, C, E, F, G, H and I as a Cabinet member of Thanet.
A, B, C, E, F, G, H and I. Does that include the paddle court?
Yeah.
That does, thank you. Right. Councillor K. Bright. Same things. Okay. Duplicate. And I'm recusing myself from the meeting for item 4B. Do members agree that minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 15th of July be approved as a correct record? Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Alban, seconded. Councillor Matterface. I will now request the clerk to set up the electronic voting for that, please. Thank you. So that's carried, thank you. Now, I do have quite a long bit here under Chair's announcements. The first is that in order to ensure the smooth running of the meeting, we have a change of order of the schedule of planning applications. I'm sorry, I'm not going to give all the correct numbers here, but first on the list will be the Greywood Care Home, second will be High Street Minster, then the Paddle Court in St Peter's, then the Winter Gardens, and then the reserve list. The next item for my announcement is that we were having some screen problems in the meeting in overview and scrutiny last night. Our audio is working perfectly okay. If we have screen problems tonight, it may impact on members' ability to see the officer presentation. We will have to wing it and decide what to do as we go. If the problems are too severe, we will take an adjournment while we try to resolve them. Now, this one's I just need to read. Members, you will have noticed that I will be recused for agenda item 4B, and the Vice Chair has sent apologies for tonight's meeting. In accordance with the Constitution, it is the responsibility of the members of this committee to elect a temporary chair to cover in the absence of the Chair and the Vice Chair. In order to facilitate the smooth running of the meeting, it is proposed that members elect a temporary vice chair for the duration of this meeting, who will then take the chair for agenda item 4B. Members may self-nominate or nominate another member. Nominations will need to be seconded. Only full members of the committee are eligible, and in this particular situation, only those members who are not also members of the Cabinet who have declared an interest for agenda item 4B. Voting will be by a show of hands. So could I have nominations for the role of temporary vice chair for tonight's meeting, please? Councillor Alban.
Yeah, I nominate Councillor Matterface, Chair.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Packman. Do I have any other nominations? In that case, with a show of hands, can I have an indication of everyone who agrees? Thank you very much. I'm now going to hand over to the Planning Applications Manager, who will now outline some points of information, including in relation to the new National Planning Policy Framework published on Monday. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the government on Monday published a revised National Planning Policy Framework and also some results of housing delivery tests over the last couple of years. So officers have reviewed the NPPF in regard to the reports before committee this evening, and our recommendation and consideration against local plan and material planning considerations is not altered by virtue of the national guidance change. So the updated guidance, including but not limited to the National Development Management Policy is about achieving well-designed places, promoting sustainable transportation, conservation, and enhancing the natural and historic environment will be outlined during presentations this evening where relevant. So on the particular applications, we'll talk about the policy that's now in the NPPF about the particular matters in question. An additional point on schedule item 4A, St Peter's Recreation Ground, just a couple of updates that have been pointed out in administrative errors. The Sport England comment that is in the consultees section outlines that the application is not one which they would comment on, but then does not include the rest of the comment. I will be talking about that in my presentation during the principal section, so I will read you the Sport England comment. It's also been in the members' room as well. And also on condition 14, there is an unfortunate typo with regards to where it's saying light refreshments and food requiring on reheating is what it says. There should be no reheating, so no reheating rather than on reheating. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So agenda item 4, firstly, any site visits will take place for committee members on the morning of Friday, the 4th of September 2026, which means I now have to return to my revised order and say that the first item is the agenda item 4J, which is Greywood Care Home, 10 Northdown Avenue, Margate. Speaking first is Mrs. Victoria Pottinger. You have 3 minutes.
Chair and members, thank you for hearing me. I'm Victoria Pottinger and I'm speaking on behalf of a number of Northdown Avenue residents who support this statement. We are asking you to refuse this application against the officer's recommendation to approve a 13-person HMO at 10 Northdown Avenue. We are not opposed to HMOs in principle. Our concern is whether this specific proposal demonstrates compliance with the Council's HMO policy. The officer's report leans heavily on the former care home, also having housed up to 13 people. But this is not a fair nor like-for-like comparison. The HMO will operate very differently from the care home, which was a managed institution. This HMO would have 13 independent occupants coming and going all day and all evening. There's a use class point 2. This is described as a 13-bed HMO in use class C4. However, C4 only covers 3 to 6 people. The application is outside the C4 classification and is sui generis. We would ask members to confirm that it has been assessed as the larger, more intensive use that it actually is. The local plan recognises that the HMO occupation is more intensive than family occupation, bringing noise, nuisance and parking pressure. That is why policy HO19 requires the council to consider whether an HMO would intensify or concentrate use to the neighbourhood's net detriment. We are concerned that the officer has treated the 5% and 50-metre figures as pass-off-L metrics. They are not. The local plan is clear. These are guidance for cumulative impact only. The real test is this proposal's individual merits, its intensity and its effect on the street. There are already 2 HMOs in very close proximity, and this adds to that pattern. Parking is a genuine concern too. Even on the applicant's own survey, parking stress on Northdown Avenue itself already reaches 78% and 72% across the wider catchment. That survey only measures overnight residential demand, and it doesn't capture the impact of the bowls club. And the spare capacity officers rely on sits across a 200-metre catchment. For older or less mobile residents, parking streets away rather than outside of their own home is not an equivalent. So we'd ask members not simply whether this proposal clears a numerical indicator, but whether another 13-person HMO is right for this quiet street and well-established community. There is also an unresolved practical issue. The officer accepts that 3 bins shown on the plans are inadequate for 13 occupants, leaving this to condition. We already have an increase in foxes and seen in the street, and seagulls frequently pick through the litter. Officers are recommending members defer and delegate this application for approval. We'd ask you not to. The evidence hasn't demonstrated compliance with policy HO19 on intensity, amenity and parking, and on that basis we're asking the committee to refuse this application. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. I will now hand to the Principal Planning Officer to outline the report.
Right, thank you, Chair. So this is the application site outlined in red, number 10 Northdown Avenue. This is an aerial image of the Greywood care home in this location here. And this is a street scene view of the site. So it's this property in this location here. So some photographs of the application site. So this is the property in question centrally in this photograph. This is the side elevation, and you can see the relationship to the adjoining Olive Court property. And this is looking the other way to the number 8 Northdown Avenue. Northdown Avenue. So this is the block plan of the application site. So you can see the property hit in this location here, and it has some outbuildings to the rear. So there is no in principle objection to the proposed change of use. There is an error that has been pointed out by the speaker that we have called it in the description use class C4 as a HMO, which does refer to the smaller HMOs, but it has been actually assessed as the larger HMO, so the size of it has been taken into consideration in the assessment that's been made, but it is correct that it should be a sui generis HMO rather than use class C4. But there is no in principle objection to the proposed change of use. There is no specific protection for care homes through the local plan policy, and a proposal would bring a vacant building back into an active residential use, making a contribution to the district's housing supply. The Council's housing licensing team have confirmed that there are existing licensing HMOs at 33 Northdown Avenue and also at 1 Lower Northdown Avenue. As has been set out in the report, neither of these properties form part of the same group frontage as the application property, and whilst they are guidance, it is clear that it is considered that the proposal would not result in more than 1 HMO within the group frontage of 20 dwellings, or the other test that's set out in the policy HO19, the existing HMOs within the area would not make up 5% within a radius of 50 metres of this application site. So it is not therefore considered by officers that the proposal would create an unacceptable concentration of HMOs that would harm the character or function of the area when it is assessed against policy HO19. So, as set out in the report, there is no external changes to the property proposed as part of this proposal, but I will briefly show members the elevations. So this is the front elevation, side elevation, the other west elevation, so the other flank elevation, and the existing rear elevation. There are also no real changes in terms of the layout of the property internally, but rooms are put to slightly different uses. So we have the existing floor plans here, so the existing basement plan, the ground floor on the right-hand side. So you can see it's a lot of the ground floor is mainly communal sort of living space, a manager's office, a kitchen. There are a couple of bedrooms on ground floor level and a shower room. So they facilitate the operation of the care home. The existing first floor plan is slightly confusing because you have the existing, what's labelled as existing first floor plan is actually the rear extension, which sits at a slightly lower level than the main property. So effectively, both these plans are actually first floor, but one showing the rear extension and this one showing the first floor of the main building, which is at slightly higher level than the rear extension. But as can be seen, there are essentially bedrooms and toilet accommodation and bedrooms and a bathroom in the main building. And this is the third floor, where again you have bedrooms and a bathroom at that level. And there's the roof plan. So these are actually the proposed floor plans. So you've had the basement on the left, so that doesn't change. Again, the floor plan internally in terms of the rooms doesn't change. And again, you have most of the sort of communal space to the sort of left-hand side and rear of this ground floor with 2 bedrooms and a shower room at this location here. And then as you move up, we've got the strange sort of detailing of the first floor again with 4 bedrooms in the rear extension and 2 WCs. And in the main building at first floor level, we have a bathroom and another 4 bedrooms. On the second floor, we do have further 4 bedrooms and another bathroom. And I don't know how easy it is to read, but that little square in each of the bedrooms or rectangular bit is actually a little kitchenette that's provided at that level to serve residents rather than them having to necessarily go down to the ground floor. So the floor plans do meet the council's requirement in terms of layout and scale of a HMO for 13 people, and they provide adequate bathrooms and communal facilities. The property also has a rear amenity area which would serve the future residents, and it is considered there is adequate there is cycle storage proposed and adequate bin storage could be proposed, but we are placing the condition on to secure that and get details from it, and then it would be approved and assessed at that point in time. But it is considered that the space around the property does allow for adequate bin storage to serve 13 people, bearing in mind its former use as a care home, which would have had bin storage as well. It is not considered necessarily that the care home residents, the residents of the future HMO would be any more noisy and generate more comings and goings than the residents of the care home, because they would it was staffed and had visitors and people coming and going. It will, has been mentioned, that the comings and goings may be more spread throughout the day, but there is no reason to think that they'd be any more noisy or cause disturbance than a large property or that could be occupied by any number of people if it did come back into a use as a single residential property or a large number of flats. In terms of parking, KCC did originally express some concerns about parking. Although this is the second floor plan, you can see there is a parking space in front of the garage that we saw the pictures of, but that is the only parking space off-road. But a parking survey was undertaken using the Lambeth method, which is the method that KCC highways require to be used. And it did assess both day and nighttime parking in the area. And it found at the busiest time a total of 131 vehicles occupied 183 parking spaces. No, legal parking spaces, so not parking spaces that sort of on junctions or anything like that on the surrounding roads. They also provided some additional information about the operation and staffing requirements and dealings that the former care home had and the traffic movements associated with that. So including highlighting staff and visitor movements to and from the care home. Based on this additional information, KCC Highways confirmed no objection to the application subject to conditions that secure the provision and permanent retention of vehicle and cycle parking to serve the development. And they have been included in the recommendation, as well as the condition requiring details of the bin storage to be submitted and approved. So the development does require sound contribution to be paid, and this would be secured via an undertaking in the normal way. This undertaking has not yet been received, so the officer's recommendation is that the application is deferred and delegated to officers for approval, subject to the receipt of that undertaking for the SAM contribution and the safeguarding conditions set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second? Seconded. Thank you. I have already Councillor Alban wishing to speak.
I'll just wait till that's gone. Whatever it is. Thank you, Chair. Well, here we go again. Evocative, as they always are, HMOs. We've seen recently a lot of, not a lot, but some applications for HMOs of which were refused, overturned on appeal, especially the 65-bed one up to St Peter's. But I have a couple of things I want to ask, please. Could you show me on the map, on the street scene, as to where these other two HMOs are? Are you able to show us that? You're not?
I am not. I don't have that map. No, the map isn't. Not.
So so what roads are they in?
They are. One of them is in North Down. Sorry, I've got to find it again. Number 33 North Down Avenue and number 1 Lower North Down Avenue.
Right, okay.
And I think there are some details in the report which say how far away they are.
Okay, sorry, I must have missed that.
I didn't mention it, but it is in
Okay.
the report, I think, the distance to this application site.
Okay. And can you say how many there are in those? What they like 6 bedrooms, or would you know that?
Don't think I have that information to hand. Sorry.
Sorry, if I may, Councillor Alban, we don't have that information, but obviously if they're licensed, they are of a scale over and above a certain amount in terms of being 2-storey, etc. And you can take it that they are HMOs. They're not necessarily the scale of what's being looked at here, obviously.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you. The other question is there, not that I could see, but is this building going to be managed as a HMO? Will there be a manager on site?
As far as I know, there's no proposal for a manager to be actually on site.
Okay.
So it'd be residents only accommodation.
I think it's quite disturbing for residents when a HMO like this comes before us, and obviously which is going to be alongside them. there are quite a number of HMOs within Thanet that are this size, which do work very, very well, and I think. But thanks for that for now, and I want to listen to what other members have to say. Thank you.
Councillor Christian Bright.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I'm just going to ask a question first, and then I have a couple of sort of queries on some of the things that we've discussed already. Could you show me the plan for the ground floor again, and tell me how they are looking at evacuation plans if there's a fire? Because that looks quite a complicated old setup there.
I don't have the evacuation plans, but that would not strictly be a planning consideration. But it was used as a care home with this layout, and I think that would have had probably more stringent evacuation needs. But I don't think that, we can control that under planning.
Thank you. I've also got a couple of questions around, it's building regs, yeah. So you made the point that, in your opinion, an HMO creates no more noise and disturbance to residents than a 13-bed HMO creates no more noise and disturbance for residents than the previous care home would have done. What sort of care home was it before? Because that doesn't make sense to me, I'll be completely honest. And speaking to residents in my ward who have had new HMOs replace care homes, I can assure you that it does create a very different feel around the street. So I want to know what that's based on.
Thanks, Councillor Bright. I'll pick this up. We don't have the information on the exact type of care from the care home. In terms of the point that the officer was raising, that's raised in the report, is about the comings and goings. So it's not necessarily about the noise emanating from the premises, which obviously we've talked a number of times about HMOs, does depend on the occupants individually. And therefore it is difficult to come down to suggest that there is evidence to say that one HMO will be very noisy as opposed to another HMO which might not be as noisy. But it's the comings and goings that was the point, and the noise that's created by that. In this instance, there was staff associated with the care home. That is a relatively low number. It's about, I think it was about 3 with a nighttime staff contingent as well, which is obviously less. But to the point that the officers raised, the visitor ability does create, I suppose, an unknown aspect of comings and goings that would happen. I think in terms of, we're thinking of resultant impact of this proposal, there is, as mentioned, comings and goings will be more spread out. Therefore, there is going to be additional comings and goings at times where they weren't previously. The problem we've always had with HMOs, and the planning system arguably has with HMOs, is sometimes it does relate to individuals' behaviour, what shifts they're on or what they're doing in the evening, etc. It's about looking at the physical aspects of the building, so it's where the entrances are, where people are going to be moving. In this instance, it's obviously a front entrance, which you may recall we had a site in Luton Avenue and Broadstairs where we had a side entrance that we had to control because of an HMO of a similar sort of number. So in terms of, and it's a detached building as well, and obviously we had the one in Fairfield Road where it's a large detached building and next to accommodation for elderly people. So it is going to result in more comings and goings at different times in the day. So we are not suggesting that there is no impact in comparison to the care home. It is a different impact, but ultimately it's about whether or not what's being proposed here would result in a significant harm over and above the general comings and goings from it being a care home. And that is ultimately that is a judgment based on the number of occupants, based on the layout, based on the detached nature, and generally the density of the area. It is quite a packed in area where there is going to be activity.
I have a final question really, and this relates to the point that Councillor Alban raised earlier around the 65-bed change of use that was overturned on appeal. We've been in these meetings talking about HMOs for a a lot of my time as a councillor. We've just had a new 65-bed HMO change of use approved. I appreciate it's not been given a licence yet. How many HMOs do we need as opposed to one-bed flats? I mean, is there a point at which we say, do you know what, we've actually got enough? There's loads of HMOs around, or is it just free for people to just make as many applications for HMOs as they like? Really, is there anything in the local plan on that?
So the local plan does break down housing need linked to our strategic housing market assessment. So that is work that's going on in preparation for the new local plan at the moment, looking at the most up-to-date data on those aspects. It was looked at as part of the Northwood Court appeal that you're looking at about what the need is for this type of accommodation. And there is a general identified need. I don't think I'm going to look to... there is no cap as such, but that's not to say that to your suggestion that we just are going to get HMOs and more HMOs. It is about a breadth of offer and ultimately not having housing choice that is limited in terms of the type of accommodation that's available. There is benefit that has to be taken into account from the provision of an HMO and the fact that you are getting, 13 people that may need a one-bed flat that could live in this property when looking at being lost as a care home, but you do have benefit of their creating accommodation. But to your point about whether or not that weight is diminished if we've got too many HMOs, there's no data to suggest that when looking at the housing need.
Sorry, I don't want to dominate. I think that makes sense, Ian, thank you. I think my sort of rejoinder to that is I've sat on this committee for 2 years. We've had loads of HMOs. I can't remember the last time we had a building of this scale that was change of use into 1 or 2 bed flats. And I just think, to me, it smacks of, I'm just going to shut up now and let other members have their say.
Sorry, I know, I do appreciate the point because what I would say is that not for the determination here, but there is the ability of us to, obviously, we published every year an annual monitoring report, which includes all of the dwellings that we've granted consent, HMOs or indeed single dwellings. It may just be that those applications haven't gone to planning committee and that it isn't as disproportionate maybe as it's perceived because obviously you wouldn't see every application for a flat, whereas HMOs are more likely to come to committee because of the nature of the concerns that they do raise.
Thank you. Councillor Matterface.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. There is a communal kitchen, but it does say that some of the rooms have a kitchenette. Now, the requirement to be licensed is 5 people to 1 shared kitchen. So obviously, if you've got 13, that would work out 3. 5 to 1 shared kitchen, 5 to 1 bathroom, 5 to 1 separate double WC. So presumably, if we've got 13, we're going to have to look at 3 bathrooms, 3 separate WCs and 3 kitchens. So my question is, how big is the communal kitchen? Is it going to be adequate to serve people, even allowing for that 1 or 2 of them got a kitchenette? But do we really want people cooking in their bedrooms, where their bedroom living room, which is a bit of a turn the clock back to the days of bedsits way back when. So just a question, how big is the kitchen? Is it adequate for this building? And how many, I didn't quite get the number, how many of the people have actually got a kitchenette in their room?
Sorry, we're just looking at what size it is on the drawing, but I can't actually read it. It's too small for me. So we do have the plan here. But in terms of the kitchenettes that are on the top sort of 2nd floor of the building, they are little kitchenettes. I'm assuming it's kind of like you might have in a hotel room, so more like tea and making facilities. I doubt it would be stretching to a hob and things like that. And there are upper rooms that are communal and often kitchens in HMOs that serve a lot of people often have, like student flats, lots of duplicates, fridges and cooking facilities, etc. But this isn't shown on, I appreciate, on this plan.
So the question was, do we have 3 bathrooms, 3 separate loos for this building?
We
or
have
some of them en suite? It looked like the 1 or 2 bathrooms. I couldn't quite see because it was
these aren't great plans. Apologies, they're a bit small. We have a shower room on the ground floor here, which would serve these 2 bedrooms. We have, in the rear extension at first floor level, we have 4 bedrooms and 2 WCs. In the main building at first floor level, we have 4 bedrooms and a bathroom. And on the second floor, in my mind, sorry, we have 4 bedrooms and another bathroom, and they're the ones with the little kitchenettes. So, and licensing have confirmed that they do meet their requirements for the HMO. Sorry, apologies as well. I forgot there is a kitchen elsewhere. It's on the rear extension in this location here, sorry. So that's 6.7 square metres and 17.2 for this kitchen in this location at the ground floor.
Is there a size limit for kitchens for HMOs that are shared with 5 rooms? I think coming back to Councillor Madface's question. Yeah, like minimum. Yeah.
Sorry, I'll just come back on that. If I'll draw members' attention to page 8 of the committee report, because the housing licensing team specifically looked at the size of what the communal living room needs to be, and if it's something, it relates to the bedroom, kitchen facilities need to be included, and that affects the size as well. So the total of the communal facilities means that they can have 13 people. You'll note there's a condition specifically saying you can't have more than 13. That is effectively to sort of make sure that when the license, if this gets granted, when the license comes in, the 2 regimes are not contrary to each other, basically.
Councillor Linda Wright.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a little bit of concern that there is no about the lack of communal areas. I think if you've got that many people living together, it would be nice if they could integrate with each other and help their mental health.
Sorry, shall I come back on that? Most of this ground floor, we have a garage and a workshop, but we have a back lounge, a dining room, a front lounge, a kitchen, and more communal space in this sort of rear of the ground floor as well. So there is quite a bit of communal space, and there is a amenity area to the rear as well. So I do think there is a balance of bedrooms and communal space that future occupants can enjoy.
Councillor Packman.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. My question is, how safe is this? It seems like we're trying to cram a lot of people into a very little space here. My concern is the parking. I don't think the Lambeth model works. And I'm sure some academic somewhere will tell me I'm wrong. But, you know, if anyone's ever tried to park down this road, even if there is 30 spaces available, people don't park like there's 30 spaces available. They park across and whatever. So my concern is parking. Is a planning consideration the safety of these people that are going in? Is that something we can consider around this? Because I do think that the fire evacuation point is a very good consideration. I know it comes in the builder regs, but surely we can't approve something if we feel that there's not adequate safety measures. Now, the difference between a care home and a HMO is you've got staff to get people out. This HMO, there is no staff, from what we've heard. So that's my other concern here, is the safety of the people going in. Also, the type of people that may be living here, you could have all sorts of vulnerabilities to no vulnerabilities. So is that a consideration that we need to take into, or are we just looking at the building as it actually is? Thank you.
So we're looking at the building as it actually is. So in terms of the question about, I suppose, safeguarding concerns, it's not a consideration that we would be required to make under a planning decision. It's a general consideration that would be taken into account if, say, for example, a licence does get granted by the HMO regime and someone is going to check whether or not they're according with the terms of the licence and something was seen, that we have a duty to report as part of our own internal council safeguarding procedures. But it's not something that we'd have to take account of in terms of looking at the occupants or requiring certain occupants to be able to come into the premises itself. In terms of the fire risk aspect, as already mentioned, this is dealt with in part as well through the HMO licensing procedure. So there is part of that which will look at the issue of fire risk. And again, this is, I suppose, no different from other applications for residential accommodation that we deal with. Fire risk isn't something that the planning system deals with unless it's very specifically works to a building that is a certain number of stories high, which is a result that we need to consult with the health and safety executive, and that's not the case here. I suppose I don't really have any comment on the highways point. It's a legitimate concern, absolutely, and you can see from the comments that have been made by Kent Highways and the fact that they came back a number of times about this, that it was a concern of theirs. It is a difficult situation when you have a baseline of parking or visitor movements that can't really be defined because there's not significant evidence of it. But that's why KCC did take the worst case scenario of going, well, what if there are 15 new cars? And then looking at the parking surveys. We've talked a bit about parking surveys before, so I do understand the concerns of members about that. But ultimately, we have to look at the evidence available to us. And if highways are not objecting to it, it is a struggle to be able to defend something at appeal, especially when, with the example that has already been mentioned a few times, even when an objection from highways resulted, it can often be a case that a lack of evidence can be exposed at appeal. So it ultimately is a concern if we don't have that evidence before us.
I think my thanks for that. I think my biggest issue is the number of people trying to occupy these spaces. I think they've looked at this and gone, how much money can we make from this? How many people can we get in there? Let's go for the maximum. I think if they applied to have like 6 flats, I'd be going, yeah, fine, no problem. 6 people trying to get out of the building. They'd be, properly segregated. There'd be a proper waste and recycling plan for 6 flats. I've got no problem with that. But trying to cram 13 people into these small, tiny rooms with kitchenettes, so there is risk, high fire risk. I know you say there's probably not going to be any ovens or hobs or whatever. I don't know if we can condition that, but let's face it, a microwave can go up just as much as a hob could go up. We've seen it before, so I'm a little bit concerned, but I'm happy to listen to other people.
Thank you. Councillor Wing.
Thank you. I'm not a little bit concerned. I'm really concerned. I mean, can I ask the question, have there been any internal structural changes from it being a care home to actually it becoming a HMO for 13 people? Or because it feels like they've just decided we're going to put an opportunistic application in, see if we can get it turned over as a HMO, and it feels very exploitative. I'm very, very concerned about the health and well-being of the people that would be in here, and I can't believe that I'm sat here in 2026 and we're discussing an application with rooms without their own ensuite facilities. You imagine you're a single lady there, or a single person there with vulnerabilities, and you've got to walk down a floor to have a pee or to have a shower. We do need HMOs. We need high quality HMOs that offer facilities that help safeguarding people in their own spaces and homes. And this feels as if it doesn't. And I'm not having a go at you because this is the applicant's issue. I also looked at cis generis. So cis generis, you can tell me if I'm wrong, you're the expert, are nightclubs, large houses of multiple occupation, theatres, casinos, betting shops, payday loans, amusement arcades, fuel filling stations, scrapyards. And I guess that they come under that planning use category because they have certain impacts. Can I ask another question? How many cis generis do we have along that road? And I also did find the HMO distance, and it does seem to mention 50 metres, and I thought you weren't allowed a HMO within 100 metres of another HMO. So I also think cooking in bedrooms, unacceptable smells, we have that from house to house already. I'm very concerned about the waste issue, given the new simpler recycling. I don't know how 3 bins is going to work for 13 people's waste. Doesn't seem to be any provision for food waste or recycling. And it just feels like an overdevelopment, it feels like overcrowding, and it actually feels unsafe.
Thank you. I'll just come back on a couple of points, if I may. The issue with regards to sui generis, just to be clear on that, that is when the use does not fall within one of the defined use categories, because the impacts of it are individualised effectively. So the use class order is quite old, it's from the late 80s. So you mentioned a number of uses there. It doesn't necessarily mean that the impact is the same as those uses. It's almost an amorphous use class, which just is everything else, basically. But it is relevant in the sense of thinking of this does have a unique impact because of the fact that it is larger than being a C4 HMO, which goes up to 6 unrelated people living together. Now, in terms of the point about distances and the other HMOs in the vicinity, the distances, I think this has already been mentioned actually with the public speaking as well. The distances aren't necessarily just a rule that, okay, if there are none within the 5%, then it's okay. It is a judgment ultimately about whether or not there is an over-concentration of particular uses in a particular vicinity. And that will be different depending on where you are, the type, the size of HMOs and those sorts of things. In this instance, there are 2, but they are not in that same row, but it is quite densely packed around that area. So we have considered whether or not to have another one within the nearby vicinity would result in a change in the character of the area. Those of you that have been on the committee for some time will recall an application which was actually refused on the Margate Road in Ramsgate for an HMO within the parade of shops that's next to near the pub crossing that eludes me slightly. I think it's might be the end of Pison's Road. And the issue with that was, yeah, Hare and Hans, that's it. The issue with that one is it was refused because of a concern about over-concentration. And unfortunately, again, it was another example where it was overturned at appeal because the inspector said, well, just because there's an HMO next door doesn't mean that overall there's an over-concentration to change the fundamental character of the area. Because in that instance, it was a main road, you had other uses, comings and goings, that sort of thing. So it is, again, it's a judgment has to be made about whether or not this results in a problem against HO 19. My final point, just to pick up about bin storage, I absolutely understand it's obviously not only an issue particularly now, but always an issue when it comes to when you have a number of people in one individual property. The care home previously did generate bin storage. Obviously, that was dealt with on a commercial basis, yeah? But in terms of that aspect of how it gets taken away is not the consideration for planning. It's about where it's stored, is the space adequate in size, and what's the visual impact of that. And ultimately, that is not going to be necessarily significantly different from how a care home would have operated in terms of the amount of waste generated, potentially. It could vary. You could have people that have lots of rubbish and people that don't have as much, but a care home would generate certainly a residual amount which would need to be taken away, but it would have a storage area. So that's why we've looked at it and considered it's a detached property. There's space in the front that could store the waste, but we just don't have the details sufficient at this point, which is why we've recommended the condition in this instance.
My point over the use of class is that on that road or in that vicinity of that HMO, it's all residential. Or that's what it seems. I don't know the area very well. So we're now introducing a different class of usage, which is in close proximity to other housing. I also want to come back at the 50 metres because I've sat in this planning meeting where we've been quoted 100 metres and now suddenly it's 50 metres. So can we have some sort of guidance on what is the distance we're actually using to say it's acceptable to have another or 5% more, whatever it is. I'm just utterly confused with the distance because in previous planning meetings we have been quoted 100 metres, not 50 metres. So that I find really frustrating because it feels as if the rules are being changed. But I'll also go back to, we've been here before when we've said the one on the one in my ward, which was on Effingham Street, where we were unhappy with, I think, 6 flats, and they went back and reduced one to create a a community space because there wasn't one. This feels higgledy-piggledy. It feels as if they haven't made any changes to the care home, and a care home is completely different to a HMO. You've got people in beds that can't get out. You've got people that have got restricted mobility. It's completely different, and I think the two buildings need to be completely different. And I'm if this had come forward as a four flats or 6 flats, then I think we wouldn't be having these conversations. I just feel really conflicted and uncomfortable about this building.
Councillor Matterface.
I just wanted to make a very quick point, which I had written down and forgot to ask. There's no report in here at all from Kent Fire and Rescue or from the police, who are usually consulted. Is that because they would be consulted when there was a licensing, or is this not considered it needed any consultation? Because I can't find anything in the report.
They wouldn't be consulted automatically. Certainly Kent Fire and Rescue wouldn't be consulted automatically. Kent Police are not a statutory consultee on this particular matter, and I mean we would look to consult them on a larger scale HMO. When I say large scale, I appreciate for the residents this is a large scale HMO, but I suppose I'm talking about Fairfield Road 20 plus.
Councillor Joanne Bright.
Thank you. Just reading the report, it says that the proposal has to comply with the objectives of the MPPPF in securing healthy, safe and high quality living environments. And I've got real concerns that these aren't healthy, safe and high quality living environments. I do feel like it's overcrowding. A care home with 13 occupants is very different from an HMO with 13 occupants that are likely to have partners as well. So it's going to exceed 13. It doesn't feel adequate to me. It feels having 4 bedrooms or 4 rooms sharing 1 bathroom on the top floor, I feel really concerned about. And I do, I echo Councillor Wing's concern about women and also young people as well. We've got 1 young person in there on the top floor with, I don't know, I just feel like there will be vulnerability there. I'd probably approve of it if there were fewer rooms. Thank you.
Councillor Alban.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Having listened to my colleagues here, I think my view is that the applicant needs to think again, and I'm sure he could get a far better occupation of that building, either by flats. I mean, we've all said that, and we will continue to say that as self-contained flats, or reduce the amount of occupancy, even though it will be a multiple occupancy, thereby being able to give a better quality of accommodation, and which would have less effect on the residents in the street. So I'm troubled by this. Thank you.
Well, Councillor Alban, you can't be troubled for much longer because you were my last speaker, unless someone nips in quickly, in which case I am now going to say we will now put the motion for the officer's recommendation to defer and delegate for approval to the vote. And I will hand over to the clerk to activate the electronic voting, please. And so that is lost. And we just need to come up with an alternative motion. And I'm going to hand over to the Planning Applications Manager, who usually comes up with a brilliant suggestion at this point.
Thank you, Chair. No pressure. Okay, I think it's very clear what members are concerned about. I think you've articulated it really clearly. I think ultimately there are 2 points that I can see that people have raised specifically. One is the standard of accommodation. A few people have mentioned about the lack of provision for bathrooms on I think it's the second floor. Is the second floor the one that's got the two WC? Sorry, I need to check. No, sorry, the top. I'm going to say top floor because the numbering is a bit off on the plans. And other floors just generally. So in terms of potential for additional en-suites, depending on if the rooms allow it with the HMO licensing. But the other thing that I think seems to encompass a number of the members' concerns is a management plan, because that allows for information that, you know, we can ask for a management plan as part of the planning application, but it will not dictate things like fire regulations, because that's dealt with by licensing, but we can have information provided that puts forward a cohesive whole about management more generally, waste, fire, and get further information about those issues so their members can make a decision giving all the information about how it's going to run that management plan. If we consider it acceptable and then you consider it acceptable in a subsequent debate, would then be able to be conditioned if you feel it's sufficient or not. So I suppose in terms of, as much as I could suggest a motion to seek amendments to provide additional bathroom facilities and a management plan to outline the concerns raised. That would be my suggestion.
Councillor Alban.
Yeah, I think an important part of this, Chair, is the amount of people who would be in there. So my view to that would be to add the reduction of the amount of residents to be, and for that to be included in better facilities in relation to those people who would then be there.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Alban. I was going to suggest very similar. Councillor Bright did indicate first.
Sorry, I was again very similar, but I was just going to suggest that it's on the grounds, as we've already talked about, fundamental character of the street. I think Councillor Packman mentioned that this street is purely residential. It hasn't got any other garages or shops or anything on it. So adding, I reckon it's around 14 or 15% additional households can be the reason behind it. So it's kind of so we can conserve the fundamental character of the street or something.
Councillor Wing.
I mean, I think my main concern, I'm sure Councillor Bright would join me in this, is that we can't be approving facilities that don't have en-suite facilities. It's just not acceptable in this day and age. Even student accommodation nowadays has en-suite facilities. It's just not acceptable. You know, the great Peter Campbell would have said, these are tomorrow's slums, and I truly feel that. And it's not high quality. If you've got to go down a floor to have a pee in the middle of the night, that's not high quality accommodation, is it?
You only do it in your own home, Councillor Wing. Just bear with us a moment.
Okay, so to try and capture everything that's been said that hopefully will coalesce around the overall member view, the motion would potentially be to defer to officers to seek amendments to the number of residents and the provision of additional facilities. I'm going to keep it as facilities, but for the purposes of the discussion, that's looking at the issues of the ensuite, that's looking at the issues of the kitchen, that's generally looking at the overall pattern of what the development is, and also, I do think this is important, a management plan to be submitted for consideration by members, and then it will be brought back to planning committee at a future date.
Can I have a proposer for that, Councillor Alban? Yes, and seconded Councillor Matterface. So I will now ask the clerk to set up the electronic voting, please. All those in favour, obviously, etc. Thank you. That is carried.
If I may, I'm not quite sure whether the residents there quite an understanding the bit.
Okay.
Whether it's refused or
Yeah.
whatever, I think you just need to explain that.
So basically what we've done, you're quite right, Councillor Alban, thank you. What we've done is we've deferred it back to the officers to come back with changes to the application that meet the concerns that we raised in the discussion. I'm getting one nod there, so it's hopefully that makes sense to everybody. Thank you. Right, moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is now High Street Minster. So I now need to find my correct page on here because now obviously everything is out of order. Right, got it. So first I have, speaking in favour, Mr James Bedingfield. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Mr Bedingfield and I am the owner of 9 High Street Minster. I fully appreciate the objections and concerns that have been raised, particularly in relation to the neighbouring amenity. These concerns have been carefully considered throughout the application process, and I understand that a key consideration for members is whether the proposal would have an unacceptable impact on neighbouring living conditions. The garden outbuilding that was originally included in the application has now been removed. The application before you therefore relates only to the proposed extensions and alterations to our home. The main concerns regarding the extension relate to loss of light, outlook and the sense of enclosure. Number 11, immediately to the north, is the closest neighbouring property to the proposed extension. For context, at its closest point, the extension will remain approximately 1.4 metres from the boundary shared with number 11 and approximately 4.3 metres from the side elevation of their property. So importantly, the extension would not be built directly up to the shared boundary and a clear separation between the two properties would remain. These matters have been specifically considered by the planning officer. The officer acknowledges that there will be some change to existing outlook and openness. However, having considered the scale, massing, siting, orientation and design of the extension, the officer has concluded that it would not result in an unacceptable degree of overshadowing, enclosure or overbearing impact. Concerns have also been raised regarding the absence of dimension drawings and a formal daylight and sunlight assessment. The submitted drawings have been provided to scale and the planning officer has considered whether the information submitted is sufficient to properly assess the proposal. The officer is satisfied that the scale drawings and site information allow the impacts of the proposal to be assessed without the need for a separate daylight and sunlight assessment. The design and the appearance of the extension have also been assessed and found to be acceptable. The officer has concluded that it would form a coherent addition to the property and preserve the character of the surrounding area. Ultimately, we are simply looking to improve and adapt our home to better meet the needs of our family, providing an additional bedroom alongside an improved and more practical living space. The amended proposal has been fully assessed against the relevant planning policies. The planning officer's conclusion is that it would not cause unacceptable harm to neighbouring amenity, and the recommendation before you is to approve the application. I therefore respectfully ask members to support the officer's recommendation and approve our application. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking against the application is Peter Mogridge, speaking as a resident.
So try again. Is that better? Yeah. I live at number 11 High Street, and I want to begin by making it clear that I do not object to development in principle. Like Minster Parish Council, I fully support the applicant's right to improve and extend their property. My concern is whether you have sufficient factual information before you this evening to properly assess the impact of this proposal. The officer's report acknowledges increased enclosure, reduced openness and outlook, and reduction of daylight available availability to my property. The report concludes that these impacts are acceptable. However, my concern is the information on which those conclusions are based. The submitted drawings contain the following note: all dimensions shall be verified on site prior to construction. Drawings are not to be scaled. Those are not my words, they are printed on the submitted plans. Yet the report reaches conclusions regarding the size, scale, relationship to neighbouring properties and likely impacts on residential amenity. Members may be aware from my written representation that I work in planning for another local authority. I have therefore approached this application from both a professional and a personal perspective, and the question I keep returning to is simple. How can the true extent of the impact be objectively assessed if the drawings themselves state that they are not to be scaled and no external dimensions have been specified? The provision of external dimensions may demonstrate that the impacts are accessible and that the officer's conclusions may be correct. Equally, they may not. The point is that clear dimensions have not been provided that allow those conclusions to be independently understood or verified. As members will be acutely aware, planning decisions should be based on information that is clear, accurate, and capable of verification. It also raises a practical question: if the external dimensions of the approved development have not been clearly established, how can anyone subsequently determine whether what has been built is what this committee intended to approve? I would also ask briefly that members not place a significant weight on the existence of our extension at number 11, as was deliberately designed to be subordinate single-storey addition following discussions with neighbouring residents, and should not be treated as justification for a substantially larger two-storey development. This is our community and our local planning authority. I want Thanet to be a beacon of good planning practice and to make decisions that are transparent, evidence-based and defensible. So members, I'm therefore not asking you to refuse this application this evening, but along with the Parish Council, I am asking you to defer it until accurate external dimensions are provided and the impact on neighbouring properties can be properly assessed. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking under section 20.1, Councillor Smith, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking to support the neighbours at 11 High Street. As is clear, the neighbours do not oppose development per se. The concern is that the scale and siting of this particular extension could cause real acknowledged harm to their home next door. I've read the officer's report, and to be fair, other concerns have been properly considered and resolved. The tree officer is now satisfied, and the report concludes the submitted plans are sufficient to assess the scheme. On that point, however, I'd raise one factual matter. I put a specific question to the case officer this morning about the submitted block plan, which states it is not to be scaled. I asked how that squared with her conclusion that the plans are sufficient to verify the extension's proximity to the boundary, and I did not receive a clear answer. That was probably my fault, because I thought I must have misread. It must have been my fault. But apparently that answer was not on the tip of her tongue. I'm sorry. I only raise it because it bears on the next issue, which is that the report confirms that at its closest point, the extension would sit around 1.3, maybe 1.4 metres from the shared boundary with number 11. The officer accepts this would bring she accepts that it would bring increased enclosure and a real reduction in openness, outlook and daylight to next door's living room, to their kitchen, hallway and dining room, rooms where the neighbours will spend their daily life. I don't disagree with the officer's facts, but the judgment she draws from them. Policy QD03 asks whether living conditions would be unacceptably harmed. A two-storey extension built within just over a metre of the boundary, materially reducing light and outlook to 4 principal rooms, is a significant change to how the neighbours will experience their home. I don't think that harm has been given enough weight, and I don't think it can be without proper dimensions.
Have you nearly finished? You've
I
hit the 3
really
minutes.
have. I've got one more paragraph. I know the committee may take a different view, and of course that's your proper role tonight, but I ask members to look closely at the 1.3 metre or 4 metre figure and consider if the acknowledged loss of light and outlook to these rooms tips the balance further than the report suggests. No extension is planned for the northern side of the house, which would have no impact on those neighbours.
Councillor Smith, you really have gone over.
Oh, no.
Yes,
I'm
please.
sorry, I always do. Thank you.
Thank you. The Principal Planning Officer will now outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the application site outlined in red. So we have number 9 in that outlined in red. Number 11 is this property to the north here, and number 7A to the south. So it's not very easy to see, but the application site is highlighted by the red pin in this aerial image, and this is a closer one. So this is the application site with number 11 in that location here, and 7A in this location. Planning permission, as has been said, is sought for a 2-storey rear and side extensions, the erection of a front porch, installation of solar panels, and the enlargement of the hard standing area to the front of the property. The application, and this has also been mentioned, originally did include the erection of an outbuilding within the rear garden, but that has now been removed from the proposal, so that's not for consideration. So we've now got some photographs of the application site. So this is looking from the high street. So this is number 9. You can see there is some hard surfacing here, and behind the wall is, at the moment, garden. This is 7A, and this is number 11 on the left-hand side. So this is now sort of walking down that driveway we saw. So this is number 9. On the right-hand side, you can see there are some openings at ground floor level and some windows here, actually, one serving a landing and one serving a bathroom. And you can see there are openings that have been referred to in the flank wall of number 11, including the door that is used, I think, understand, as the main entrance to the property. So we've now moved further down, and we're standing looking at back towards number 11. So you can see the windows in that flank elevation, the door, and that's a kitchen window that has been referred to. And again, another view looking at number 11. So you can see that's the extension that's been mentioned at number 11. This is the kitchen window. But you can see there is interaction between the two properties at this point in time. So there is kind of a bit of mutual overlooking and interaction between the two flank elevations. And that's another picture just showing the rear extension. This is a kitchen window, as I understand it, and the the bin storage for number 9, and a shed at number 9 that is existing. So that is looking back towards, standing at the rear and looking up towards the high street. So you can see that shed we just saw in the previous photograph, the kitchen window, and the rear extension of number 11 is in this location behind the hedge. And this is a photograph of the existing rear extension, and that's 7A and the relationship between the two properties with 7A to the left. So this is the existing block plan of the site. So you can see there is an extension to the rear, and we saw that in the photographs, and it's a conservatory, and that will be demolished if the proposed application is approved. So this is the existing ground floor. So we have, this is the conservatory and rear extension that would be demolished if it is approved today. And this is the existing first floor, so it's a 3-bedroom property currently. And this is the existing roof plan. So it's existing front elevation, the existing side elevation facing onto number 7A, and this is the elevation we saw the photographs of fronting, facing onto number 11, and the rear elevation, so that's the conservatory and the existing rear extension. So this is the proposed block plan. Sorry. So you can see we have the garden here, number 11 is in this location, 7A down here, and this is the area of additional hard surfacing that would be created to the front of the house. So this is the proposed ground floor. So this is the extension in this location here, as well as a small extension to the front, which is the proposed porch. So the extension would project some 4.6 metres from the rear wall of the main dwelling, and it would extend across 9 metres, and it, as has been mentioned, it does wrap round to the side of the property, and bringing it set back, but the rear part of the extension would be bringing development closer to number 11. The porch that is provided to the front is a small addition. It's 1.2 metres by 2.5 metres with a pitched roof. This is the proposed first floor. So essentially, the first floor extension will add an additional bedroom with dressing room to the first floor, so it becomes a 4-bedroom property. And this is the roof plan, and we have solar panels being installed or proposed to be installed to the rear elevation and to this roof slope, which is the roof slope facing 7A. So the proposed front elevation. So you can see the porch and the side extension here, but as has been seen, that is actually set back, so you don't see it it's not in line with the front of the house. So there is some relief from the front. This is the proposed elevation facing onto number 7A, so you can see the rear extension of the proposed solar panels and a new obscure window. This is the elevation that would face number 11. So you can see there is, in the existing house, there is that window we saw, which is the landing window, and there is a door, which actually serves a utility room. And this is the rear elevation. So again, we have solar panels and we have windows and doors and changes to fenestration in that. Oops, sorry. So to sum up, the proposed extensions have complementary roof forms, materials and fenestration to that of the host building, and are considered by Office to be acceptable in terms of scale of design and scale. The proposed porch is a modest addition and would not be visually harmful or dominant. And it is acknowledged that some of the solar panels, particularly the ones to the southern roof slope, would be visible in some views from the high street, but they are a common feature on residential properties and do not appear overly dominant. So as such, the proposal is considered acceptable in terms of its impact on the character and appearance of the area. In terms of living conditions, members have seen the photos of the existing relationship with between number 11 and number 9, and there is that degree of fairly open interaction between the two properties along the flank elevation. The proposed side extension would be set at a approximately 1.4 metres away from the shared boundary at its closest point, and with number 11 set approximately some 3 metres away from that boundary, the shared boundary. And the side extension would have an eaves height of 4.8 metres. I have noted the comments about the plans not being to scale, or not the notation on the plan, particularly the block plan, saying do not scale, but they have a scale bar, and it is common for plans that come in for planning applications to be reliant on scale bars, and for officers and members of the public and any other interested party to be able to use that scale bar to scale the development. I understand the notation that not to be scaled relates to the more technical building plans that would be needed to construct the dwelling, rather than actually at this stage to understand the impact of the development on neighbouring extensions, properties, etc. So we are, as far as officers are concerned, we do consider there is enough information for members to consider and make a judgment on. But on that note, it is acknowledged that the proposal would bring built form closer to the flank wall of number 11, and there would be a reduction in the sense of openness between the two dwellings. But having regard to the siting, design and scale and massing of the proposed extensions and the separation distances, it is not considered that the impact on number 11 would be significantly harmful to warrant a recommendation of refusal. And other relationships in terms of living conditions on other adjoining properties have also been assessed and found to be acceptable. As has been mentioned, the proposal would increase the number of bedrooms in the property, number of bedrooms in the property from 3 to 4, but that is not considered to be a significant increase. And there is on-street parking available on the high street and surrounding roads, and the hard surface areas we see into the front of the property is also being increased, which could potentially allow for more off-street parking to serve the number 9. As a householder application, the site is exempt from B&G. It is not considered that a daylight and sunlight assessment is required for this scale of development, and officers have considered the information that's been put forward is sufficient for us to understand the impact on the neighbour in this instance. So, as has been mentioned, we are of the opinion that sufficient information has been submitted, and our recommendation is one for approval. So we would welcome members to approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you. I have first Councillor Christian Bright.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, hang on a minute. I've missed a bit. I do that from time to time. I just got this dagger's look from my left-hand side. I felt it with great pain. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Second.
Thank you. We will now move to the debate. Councillor Christian Bright.
Thank you. We got there in the end. Thank you for the report and to both public speakers. I'll give my impressions first of this, and then we'll ask a question. I'm struggling to see anything at all that I'm against in this, but I will obviously listen. To me, this looks like any number of 3-bed semi extensions that we see time and time again. I think the point on solar panels, we shouldn't even be talking about solar panels regardless of whether it's a conservation area or not. I think we all need to see as many solar panels as possible going forward. So yeah, I mean, really, I'm struggling to see any problem. I think the distance is an important thing between the buildings, and I'm just going to ask for confirmation that we're looking at around 3 metres between the actual house of number 9 and the house of number 11. Is it not 3 metres?
Sorry, it's slightly more, because you've got approximately 3 metres from number 11, the flank wall of number 11 to the shared boundary, and then approximately 1.4 metres
Okay, thank you.
From the shed boundary to the increased extension at number.
Thank you. That's that's reassuring. Look, I mean, I quite often say this when it comes to extensions. I think anyone building next door to your house is going to be slightly daunting. I think we can all accept that, but you soon get used to it. I mean, 4 metres gap. I'm struggling to see any reason why I wouldn't just wave this through.
Councillor Alban.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to carry on from Councillor Bright, actually, the design, the bulk fits in. I really can't see a problem with this, and providing that the officers are clear, which they seem to be, clear that the information that they've got to deal with the application was enough, and their professional ability to be able to deal with that is agreed, then I'm finding extreme difficulty to find anything against this. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I don't have Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Yeah, I just did want to clarify. Well, of course, as we won't be seeing any of these at Planning Committee. I'm correct, aren't I, in saying that this will be the last one? Because going forward, single housing applications like this aren't able to be brought to Planning Committee, so they will be solely assessed by the planning officer.
Councillor Garner, can you lean in slightly towards your microphone? You are very relaxed there, but I can barely hear you.
I can't.
Thank you.
Can't help it. Can you hear me now? Good. Yeah, I would just like clarification before I make my mind up. The point about the drawings currently not being clear around measurements. What you're telling us is that we have got enough information that when the detailed drawings get done and submitted before any work starts, that they will be the number of metres you're saying they will be. Because I'm just wondering about, we approve this. If we were to approve this, they go away and they do their drawings, they do their building, and then because there hasn't been 100% certainty about this, we go and have a look at the building control, go and have a look, and it's 2 metres instead of 4 metres away. What can we bring back to this to show that this shouldn't have been done like this? Yeah, but
thank you, Chair.
I understand enforcement.
I will clarify this point because it has come up before a while ago, I must admit. So, plans need to be submitted for an application to be valid in accordance with the procedure order to an identified scale. So we have a scale bar, so it's to an identified scale. The wording that's annotated on the plans is because the drawing produced for planning is not the construction drawings that are produced, and often it is effectively because the drawings that are drawn are often using the OS mapping, and they're using stuff which might have been checked on site but hasn't been done with a full topographical survey, for example. And this is usually the case with household applications because of the expense of getting a full topo survey at that point. In terms of what the safeguard that I think Councillor Orban was was raising is that if it transpires that actually what the plans that have been submitted cannot be built as they're shown, or in fact your example is it's bigger, it's slightly bigger, or it's got a slightly different relationship. If the extension itself is to the identified scale as shown on the plan, it's got the external dimensions of how it extends out of the property, then there is no breach of the condition that we're going to put on saying you've got to build it in accordance with those plans. If it's not built, not built in accordance with those plans, it's an enforcement matter, and we would be confident in enforcing when there is an identified scale on the plan. It is something that, I certainly think that will take away the point of looking at it in terms of, trying to remove that annotation, but the annotation does not supersede the scale on the plans, nor the condition that we would be putting on saying you've got to build it in accordance with that plan. In my professional view, I think it's totally enforceable, even with that annotation.
Councillor Wing.
Could I just take a look at the overhead view that showed the solar panels, because that gives us an indication of which way the sun is shining. It's the and I'm assuming that the impacted property is on this, as we're looking at it, the left-hand side. So the sun would fall and rise that way or that way on this side. So there is likely to be some shadowing of that building that previously had sun. I just think it would have been prudent, given that there is a concern from a neighbour, it would have been prudent to have provided those shadowing reports, or whatever they are, because I can't, I live in a situation where I do get impacted by the buildings, but we were all built in the 1800s, so it's just something I accept. It would have been nice to have known what the difference between the sunlight now that property receives and the sunlight that the property won't receive, if any. And it would have been useful for me as a person that sits on the committee to actually see that assessment, but it's not there, so I can't comment.
Do we have a similar drawing to the one we've just seen, but showing the two properties in relation to each other? So, thank you. I might not be using the right words.
No, sorry, yeah, that's...
Thank you. I don't have any further questions, so at that point we will now put the motion for the officer's recommendation for approval to the vote, and I will hand over to the clerk to set up the electronic voting. Thank you. The motion is carried. So we now move to the next item. If there's anyone who wants to escape, you are, of course, welcome. Well, actually, I've got two councillors I need to kick out, haven't I? Yeah, what we'll do is we'll take a 7-minute adjournment at this point. Anyone who doesn't want to stay for the rest of the meeting is welcome to also leave if your application has been heard. And I will kick out councillors Christian Bright and Alban. Okay, members, looks like we are all back, so we can move on to the next item on tonight's agenda, which is agenda item 4A, item A01, St Peter's Recreation Ground, Callis Court Road, Broadstairs. First up, speaking against the application is Dr. Anthony Neath. You have 3 minutes. Thank you. Microphone.
There we go. Good. Chair and councillors, good evening. My name is Dr. Tony Neath, and my wife Annette and I have lived in Callis Court Road for over 40 years. The proposed pedal courts would sit only 21.5 metres from our home, with our garden a mere 5 metres away. We are not opposed to sport, but are strongly opposed to a development that would severely harm residential amenity and deprive us and our neighbours of the right to peaceful enjoyment of our homes and gardens. There are also significant adverse issues regarding parking and overflow. Paddle is relatively new in the UK. Planning authorities across the UK are increasingly recognising that paddle cannot be treated like traditional tennis. The acoustic profile is fundamentally different. Unlike tennis, paddle uses solid composite bats, hard enclosure walls, and pressurized balls. This generates repetitive, high-frequency, gunshot-like noise, sharp, intrusive, percussive sounds, accompanied by metallic wall impacts. Human hearing is hardwired to find such noise impossible to ignore. It's not a background hum, it's a persistent, intrusive disruption. Across the country, paddle applications are now being refused, and paddle sites are facing noise abatement notices due to ineffective noise mitigation. In fact, in April this year, in Harrogate, an application was refused despite the applicant offering to construct an acoustic fence. The planning committee ruled that the acoustic screen would fail to sufficiently absorb the low-frequency impact and high-frequency crack of ball strikes, and also the sounds of players shouting and cheering. This harm to residential amenity was ruled to outweigh the sport's benefits, regardless of the 4-metre acoustic barrier. St Peter's Recreation Ground is surrounded by quiet residential streets, where residents have a right to quiet enjoyment of their homes and gardens. Approval of this application would, from morning until evening, 7 days a week, subject us to relentless, intrusive noise nuisance. Councillors, I ask you simply, would you accept this level of persistent, intrusive noise so close to your own home and garden? Please protect our residential amenity and our quality of life. I urge the committee to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. The Planning Applications Manager will now outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. So the application is for the erection of 4 paddle courts, a single-storey cafe and container unit with outdoor seating and associated works. So the site is on St Peter's Recreation Ground, which is accessed via Callis Court Road. I'm going to have to move my mouse around a bit because I've just realised I haven't made it bigger, but hopefully you can all see it. If you don't, please shout at me. So the site is the area to the north of the existing orange tennis courts, so it's in this location here. You've got the allotment gardens to the west and residential properties along Callis Court Road, which are obviously one of the main considerations of this application. You've then also got the rugby club and accessible facilities in St Peter's Rec. So this is just a site plan showing exactly where the site is. What you wouldn't have been able to see, and you won't be able to see from the photos, is that there are 3 grass courts on the site at the moment, but they have been not used for a number of years. They were granted in, I think, 2004 originally. So technically you could clear the site and use them as tennis courts at the moment without needing planning permission, but they are not used at the present time. So this is just a few images from Google showing the 3D, just to give you an idea of the spatial areas that we're talking about from a bit higher. So you've got the tennis club here, and you can see the floodlights there, and you've got then the site itself, so you can see it's quite overgrown. And then you can see the residential properties along Callis Court Road. This is turning around, again using the orange tennis court as an identifier. You can see we're now looking from the road, which accesses the parking for the tennis club and the rugby club. And you can see the site again here. It is enclosed with mesh fencing, which we'll look at in the ground level photos. So this is a view with the road that we were looking at, the access road that goes to the rugby club behind us. The wall on the left-hand side of this image is the rear boundary wall of the residential properties on Callis Court Road. So the area in question is in the distance. So this is not an area that's proposed to be developed. So going along there, just to see, you've got a wall. So it's in excess of 2 meters, the wall along there. There is some deviation all the way along as you go, but it is a substantial boundary wall, which we'll talk about in a little bit. This is the actual area itself in terms of the fencing that denotes the area of the existing grass tennis courts. So then this is looking back towards where we were previously standing. So now the residential properties are on your right. This is just a further down view of the wall. As mentioned, you can see here, you've got the tennis courts again. So there is a gap between the tennis courts and this site. And then we're going to look from that gap. So you can see that gap with the site on your left, tennis courts on your right, and you can see one of the residential properties in the background there. And then this is from the other corner. So that's the same. So you've got 2 properties that are here. And then you can, so that's looking across at the boundary wall in the distance, and this is the other corner of the site. So the development is all within the fenced area. And then this is just another little view, just looking back towards those properties and the wall. So just to turn around again, appreciate this is an isometric taken from Google satellite imagery, but it's quite useful just to understand that there are neighbours in close proximity to the wall with different extensions at the rear, specifically, and outbuildings as well. So we'll look at the distances in a little bit, but you have got residential properties directly adjacent to the site with the gap of the footpath, but very, very close proximity. So this is the proposal itself. So it's for 4 paddle courts, as mentioned, a cafe and a small container unit, which has got a toilet and storage facilities in it. You've then got a landscaped area as well and some seating. So in terms of just orientating yourselves, members, the right-hand side of this image is where those residential properties were, and you can see the pathway that runs along the side of the existing fenced area. So the site is allocated under local plan policy GI 05, which is the protection of open space policy. So this is an allocation that runs on the it runs with our various parks across the district. It's to try and ensure that we don't lose open space and recreational facilities to development, and the principal section of the report specifically looks at this type of use and whether or not this complies with the principles of that policy. So, as already mentioned, it is currently some tennis courts which could be used, even though they haven't been used for a number of years. We do consider that the proposal does accord with the role of St Peter's Recreation Ground, the recreational facilities as well, and would provide enhanced sporting infrastructure above the existing that's provided. We also have a very relevant policy framework, which is the neighbourhood plan. Policy BSP 15 talks about supporting development that promotes healthy wellbeing and opportunities for exercise. There is also similar wording within the National Planning Policy Framework, both the old one and the new one, about promoting healthy communities and how their sports facilities have got positive weight attached to it on that basis. To come back on the point that I raised about the Sport England comment, the development doesn't fall within their statutory remit to comment. However, they have commented just generally about that if the proposal results in the loss of a sports facility, then you should consider whether or not it actually we should protect those sports facilities and refuse the application, or if there are new sports facilities, whether or not that relates to the recommendations and priorities within any playing pitch strategy that the council may have. In this instance, there is a change in the type of provision of sports facility. We do have relatively recent evidence because we've had a few of these applications in the last couple of years, and Sport England on a different application had looked at the need for Thanet more generally and considered there was a need for about 11 paddle courts across the district. We've approved 5 of them on the New Hayne Road, which is the facility that you'll almost certainly seen, and so there is still a need for additional facilities. So we do think it meets that need, and it doesn't fall foul of any of the other requirements for any loss of open space or sports facilities. Oh, sorry, that's just the image just showing the actual extent of the allocation of the local plan policy. So that's GIO 5. One thing that I will just mention as well, there is, as mentioned, a cafe use on the site. We do consider that that is ancillary to the principal use of the site being paddle courts. I mentioned at the top of the meeting as well about the restrictions about actually what's sold there to ensure there's not other types of odour and disturbance. But we consider that it's functionally linked to the sports use, and it's not a main town centre use in the sense of it's not going to compete with the vitality and viability of Broadstairs town centre. So we do think, as on a principal point, this type of facility in this location would be acceptable and would accord with the requirements of the MPPF. In terms of the appearance of the proposal, so this is an image showing one of the courts specifically to give you an idea of what that would look like. So the actual materials that are used are, you have sort of mesh, the sort of metal that's been mentioned on the sort of ends of the length of the court, and at the ends of the court you've got mesh at the bottom, but then you've got the sort of hardened glazing, hardened perspex potentially at the end of the court. So there is visibility through the actual courts to see what's going on, and on a visual impact basis, whilst this is a bit more permanent in appearance to what you get around tennis courts, and obviously we've seen the images in St Peter's Rec, we do think that this won't have a significant adverse impact on the character of the area, which is a sports, got sports facilities around, so we don't think it's out of character on a visual basis. There is also boundary treatments as well, which are going to be a bit more like your tennis court style mesh. And there's an image later that I'll show you, which goes around the full extent of the site, which you can see in this section, which shows the courts and it's similar to the existing in terms of the mesh fencing around it. With the entrance, this is the top image is if you're looking from that road where we started walking with the photos, so looking from north to south. And then the opposite at the bottom image there. So you can see the general impact of the development. And you can see in the bottom of these two images just an idea of, this is a view from the, I suppose what would be the western elevation. You can see that the actual cafe structures, which we'll look at in a second, are no higher than the mesh that's there. So looking at those, the cafe structure and the actual equipment and the toilet that's being provided. You have effectively modified shipping containers but clad in timber. Multicoloured timber is proposed to try and be as vibrant as possible. This is what the cafe looked like, which is the larger structure here. We don't have particular concerns. It's not of a scale that would cause, again, an obtrusive impact in our view. You do have other sort of functional sport facilities in the area, so we don't think there's a huge visual impact as a result of the proposal. So one of the, if not the most significant issue is the impact on living conditions with regards to this type of facility. You'll see from the report that this is a matter that's been looked at by environmental health on a number of occasions, linked to the amount of information that was submitted. So just to give you an update in terms of the MPPF, we do have I suppose, an update on this point about living conditions, and it's referred to as living conditions and pollution, which is National Development Management Policy P3, which is effectively saying what is already in our local plan and it was previously in the MPPF, that development proposals should be appropriate for their location and should take into account the likely effects of pollution on health, living conditions and the natural environment. But specifically, development proposals should provide healthy living conditions for occupiers and users in terms of adequate access to light and avoiding exposure to levels of air, noise, artificial light and other sources of pollution which could have an adverse effect on health and the quality of life. Where necessary, suitable mitigation should be incorporated to secure acceptable living conditions. And then it goes on to talk about specifically about impact on light, as well as making sure that if to reduce to a minimum potential adverse impact resulting from noise and not result in noise exposure that would have a significant observed adverse effect, which is part of the assessment that environmental health do. We also have our own policy QDO2, which talks about making sure that it's got to be compatible, uses and proposals have got to be compatible with neighbouring buildings in terms of issues like noise, vibration, light, etc. So we received a noise impact assessment with the application. As a result of that, there were concerns raised by environmental health about that, and an independent peer review was commissioned to look at the assessment that had been carried out. As a result of that, environmental health were considered that the issues had been dealt with sufficiently in the assessment of the impact of noise, but the recommendation that was raised related to effectively needing a suite of planning conditions and measures within the noise impact assessment that needed to be in operation, I suppose, in totality or as a cumulative impact to reduce and mitigate the impact of the noise. So one of those is the opening hours being 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. This facility does not have a roof on it. So in terms of operating at night, it's less feasible, although there is lighting, but that's a cut-off that's provided within a planning condition as a requirement from environmental health that it should cease at 8 p.m. at night. There is also a noise mitigation plan which has been submitted, which is to try and identify a number of measures to look at how the actual facility can be managed with a noise complaint procedure, confirmation of no amplification, no uses of, so a group meeting there couldn't have a speaker or any amplification, or if someone was doing a training session, no whistles, additional signage, more of the low-level management that you would get in a noise noise management plan. As well as that, there is an acoustic, get the right note. You've also got an acoustic perimeter screen, which is being proposed on the eastern boundary. That has got to be at least 2.6 metres high and provide attenuation of 10 dB. The materials of which haven't been detailed, that would, it's still to be confirmed exactly the nature of that, and that is one of the conditions that environmental health have required. In terms of the other issues to do with impact on neighbours, one of the matters that's been looked at in quite a bit of detail is the lighting. There's a lighting assessment that's been done. As mentioned, the lighting is obviously only in operation, so until 8 p.m. But in terms of these specific columns, they are 6 metres high floodlights and there is a condition that Environmental Health have specifically asked for, that on the boundary wall of the neighbours, and I will just make sure, I definitely need my notes for this one because I needed to check this out, is that it has to be that the vertical illumination at the facade of the neighbouring property, so that's on the wall, can't exceed 10 lux. So the idea is you put a light sensor on the wall and it tells you how bright it is. So that's their way of assessing actually how the lighting, whether or not it's working sufficiently or not to avoid light pollution to neighbouring properties. So the conditions in total to deal with the impact on neighbours relate to condition 13, which is opening times, condition 15 relating to the acoustic screen, condition 16 in regards to the noise management plan, and also its condition, sorry, bear with me. It's condition 11 to deal with the lighting assessment that's been provided, and also condition 12, which is saying the external lighting has to be switched off when the area is not in use. So other issues that have been raised by residents and that have been looked at as in the assessment relate to car parking. There is no car parking that is being proposed as part of this proposal. There has been concerns raised by KCC Highways, of which has resulted in a transport statement being provided, which includes details of existing parking, serving the tennis courts and the rugby club and the recreation ground, which is stated as 40 spaces, which is in the area to the north, as indicated by the plan. That shows from just an aerial image. Those members that are familiar with the site will know that there's parking often, as you can see in this image, along this road as well. And obviously that will fluctuate depending on the uses that are going on, obviously if there's a rugby match, etc. And so there is parking demand in the area as a result of the existing recreation ground. That is definitely the case. The site is sustainably located. Whilst it's over the 800 metres to the train station, it's 900 metres to the train station, so it's relatively well located to Broadstairs train station. It's well located in terms of pedestrian and cycle links. There are, I'm going to be really careful with what I say now, there are bus routes in the vicinity of the site, one run by Regent, one run by Stagecoach, the 37 and the 69, that are on a basis of... KCC Highways have considered this, again, the amount of the different elements of this. There has been a bit of back and forth here, and I think that the proposal will result in additional parking demand. There is no doubt that it will. The question is whether or not there are enough other methods of transportation that can be amplified as part of this, which is why that they've recommended a travel plan condition is also put on so that further measures are identified about how they can result in a modal shift from car to other forms of transportation. But there is an impact, but highways do not consider that there would be a severe harm to the surrounding streets in terms of parking as a result of the fact there is parking available for the wider recreation ground and on the basis that the travel plan is provided. This is from the transport, so I'm addressing the committee, to be clear. This is a plan that the transport statement included to show the routes, but highways have given the view more broadly that it is a sustainable location. So in terms of the other issue, which is biodiversity, as you will have seen from the aerial images, the site has become overgrown because it hasn't been used, and that will incur the statutory requirement for biodiversity net gain because it's more than 25 square metres of habitat. So this has been looked at in terms of as modified grassland. That's the type of habitat that it would be. As a result of this proposal, there is a reduction, obviously, in the habitat by virtue of the hard surfacing simply that's created. And what's being proposed is that you've got some modified grassland replacing it, but then you've got native planting that would be specified by a landscaping scheme. Now, with the metric that's been submitted, there is a reduction in the habitats on site by virtue of the development. So as a result of that, the applicant will need to find from off-site 0.9 0.08 habitat units to get to the 10%, because at the moment there's actually a 10% drop on site. So they need to go over and above to be able to achieve the statutory biodiversity net gain. Now, that is covered by the automatic condition that is put on every single application when there is a biodiversity requirement as a result of the change to the Planning Act that was made last year. So whilst we would always look for opportunities to get development that has B&G gains on site, there is a practical reality here, which is that by developing the site, there isn't enough space to get the required B&G on site, and there is the provision to have it off site by virtue of other measures, be it the habitat bank that we've got in the district, or if another site can be found that could provide those credits. But they will have to resolve that, if granted, before they start development. So in terms of overall, the application does attract positive weight because of the type of facility that's being provided and the particular need for that type of facility. It has been considered the main issues are the impact on living conditions of residents. That has been looked at extensively by the environmental health team, and it does rely on the conditions that have been placed upon the development to operate successfully without an impact. We do consider that it does provide the right balance between the positive weight and the safeguarding conditions with regards to the impact on neighbours, and therefore it is recommended for approval subject to the safeguarding conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. Would the Vice Chair please second?
Seconded.
And do I have any speakers? Councillor Matterface.
Thank you, Chair. This is very welcome investment. I was told originally it was to be available to the public and there would be coaching on site, which obviously is a definite plus. These courts have not been used for decades. In fact, there are trees growing there, which will obviously have to be felled. Ian's mentioned the transport statement. If only there was a bus once an hour at Lanthorn Inn, we'd all be a lot happier. But oddly, doesn't mention the loop, which is only a 5-minute walk away. With a stop at the bottom of Callis Court Road or Baird's Hill and a stop at St Peter's Railway Bridge. There is a footpath from the station the back way, so it's probably the 800 metres there. But I do have quite a few questions I'd like, and then obviously I'll throw it open. The fencing is still that wire mesh, but these paddle courts have glass walls, correct? They have glass walls?
It's glazed and the mesh is the
Yeah. So are they transparent or are they...
Sorry, Councillor Matthew, let me go back to the... Sorry, that's my fault. Hang on, let me just... I'm going to show you this is an indicative idea. I just want to make sure, just to give you some context for the elevations, which is what they'll build, so don't take this as read. But the idea is you have the mesh either side of the court, the length of the court, and then you will have actually a meter, which I'll show you in the elevations of the mesh, and then above it it's the glass. So that's the bit of the concern about the noise element of things, which is something that's been looked at in the detail. Yeah, so this is we'll go with that one. That's the elevation showing the court, which gives you a bit more detail on that.
But the clear glass is that, done some research, because paddle, when this application came up, was something completely new. And I found a magazine called Paddle Magazine, which is obviously a trade publication. And it says that under no circumstances should clear glass be used in any paddle courts, because apparently in Spain, where paddle, I believe, began, thousands of birds have been killed by flying into clear glass. So the recommendation is that any glazing is either patterned or has some decal on it. Is that applicable here? Because it's not really clear.
Okay, so I'm not sure of if a decal will be put on or whether or not it will be there'll be a film on it at all. So it hasn't been raised by KCC Ecology that this is a particular issue with regards to a paddle court. Obviously, they've looked at both the preliminary environmental assessment that's been done, but also the general impact on protected species. Now, it might be that that's it hasn't come through in experience in this country particularly. It may be specific to certain areas or certain bird species. I don't have that information. Why? I suppose from our purposes, there isn't any evidence to suggest that this would result in harm to particular bird species that are protected, or indeed something that we could extrapolate out into a cause of concern, especially when we don't have ecology sitting behind us to say that's the case.
Well, that's disappointing because, this is in a public park where there are plenty of birds because the park's full of trees and there are birds that roost there. There are also bats, but hopefully bats, because of the way they behave, would just fly up and over. But I'm not happy the fact that Kent Ecology is not particularly concerned about that aspect of it. I found another article in the Times newspaper that is very concerned about clear glass and the impact on wildlife. I was going to mention parking, but I think other people might pick up on parking. Or if Councillor Bright wants to pick up from there, anybody else has got points they want to raise. I will say, if there's ever a rugby match on and it's an away team, there will be coaches in that car park. There'll be no parking for private cars at all.
We can always come back to parking, Councillor Matterface. I've got Councillor Joanne Bright next, please.
Thank you. When I first heard about these paddle courts going in, I was really excited. So initially, really excited. I think it's brilliant development. We need that. That's an area of land that hasn't been used for years. We need activities there. Paddle is obviously very exciting new sport. It will get people that play paddle then can progress to tennis as well. So it just, to me, it made sense. But then obviously I've listened to neighbours, and that's obviously we have to consider the noise impact of these courts. They haven't got a roof. There's no roof. So regardless of whether we've got these soundproofed walls, if the sound goes up. I went to the Hayne Road paddle courts just to listen, just to go and hear the sort of the sound and how they work. And I think they've got 4 or 5 courts there. And when I went yesterday, every single one was full. They were playing doubles as well, so that's at least 16 people playing. It was noisy. But that's in an enclosed space. So I am concerned about the noise. I don't know whether there's any way of... Does there have to be 4 courts? Could you remove court 4 and then maybe have more trees there? Or could there be a rule that when people go and play that courts 1, 2 and 3 are used before court 4? Because court 4 is so close to those houses. Is there a way of sort of mitigating that level of noise? The other thing I was concerned about is obviously parking. My daughter goes to Page Mason's school, which is a dance and musical theatre school, which is right opposite the recreation ground. That's a really busy, thriving school. They've got over 200 students there, and on some evenings when I've gone and dropped my daughter off there, if it clashes with a rugby match, parking is a nightmare. It's absolutely, you just don't want to take your car there. So parking is going to be an issue, and that's before like Thanet Wanderers are having a rugby festival or a big home match where there's coaches and stuff. So I do worry about that, but I do feel conflicted because I love the look of the development. It just feels to me that is it in the wrong place? So I'm interested to hear more. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bright. Councillor Packman.
Yeah, I think I share Councillor Bright's and Councillor Matterface's concerns. I would like to see less. I don't want to discourage this new sport. I don't want to see this area left for another 10, 12, 15 years to overgrow, although I welcome the wildlife that would probably live there. But what I would like to see is a reduction in the courts. I think 4... potentially having 16 people on these courts whacking this, what the gentleman said, tin pressured ball, in close proximity. I think if I was sitting in my back garden on a Saturday afternoon trying to entertain my family and all you could hear was ding, 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 I think I'd be a bit annoyed. And I think we would be opening ourselves to noise complaints and noise management plan and all sorts of stuff. So I do think we need to look into, can we condition that actually they reduce the number of courts? I do welcome the investment to the area, and I do like the suggestion of actually enclosing it more with what, like trees and plants and things like that, because that would reduce noise as well and encourage wildlife to go. I do share the concern of Councillor Matterface. If we're going to be harming birds and wildlife in this area, we do need to be looking at plain glass. And we do it for human beings. We have to glaze it for human beings, so we should be doing it for wildlife. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Garner next.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I echo a lot of what's been said. This sport paddle ball is taking off. In fact, it seems Broadstairs seems to be becoming the paddle ball hub of Thanet, because there's paddle ball courts 800 metres away in Memorial Rec. Well, pickleball, all right, pickleball. You can play paddle ball on it, but right, there are ball courts, paddle, but there are all sorts of courts. So it does seem it's quite close to this one, even though it is pickle and not paddle. But you're knocking a ball over anyway. I've listened to the concerns of the local resident, as we all did, and not just the noise, but the lighting does seem an issue, and it would be an issue. And I agree with Councillor Packman. If it was next door to me, then I wouldn't be too happy about it. I could see there's talk about a noise mitigation plan, and we've got these sensors that are going to measure the light. But any plan like that is only worth the paper it's written on if it's actively managed and enforced. So I'm wondering how are any conditions going to be managed? Who's going to be there to call out people who are playing late, or to call out, or to not let people on to play late? Is the cafe going to be open between 8 and 8? And is the people managing the cafe or running the cafe going to be the same people who are managing the courts and managing the noise mitigation plan? Because if they're not, then there is no management of noise mitigation on the site at all. And as a matter of interest, this site was looked a few years ago. There was a lot of talk about a tiny forest being planted there, which was a little while ago, but right near there. But because that might have been a good use for it. But I'm all in favour of paddle courts or pickleball courts, wherever they are. But I think there are some serious concerns that need to be addressed with this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back on some of the particular concerns about how it would be managed on site. So the noise management plan has various provisions in which, as part of the planning condition, if they weren't accorded with, the process would be, if they breach the condition, we receive a neighbour objection saying, one of the things is there's got to be staff on site all times to manage these points. If that wasn't the case, for example, then if we got a complaint, we write to the developer. If they breach it again, we serve a breach condition notice. If they breach it within that time period, then we go to court. So there's provision within the condition. We think that would be strong enough in terms of the management aspect of things. And the noise management plan does include certain elements that we would expect to be dealt with by the company that run it. So there's a complaints procedure in the first instance, which has to be responded to within a particular time frame, signage that has to go up, those sorts of things. Ultimately, if the requirements that have been put in the condition about, sorry, let me just get the right condition. Sorry. Which relates to, where is it? It's the condition with regards to the acoustic fence, the acoustic screen that's got to be constructed, in terms of how that's constructed. If it's not constructed in accordance with the requirements, again, that's a problem in terms of its operation. There is only so much that we can do through a noise management plan, but it's the overall package of the operating times, the screen, the management plan, and the fact that you know, we have had this on the other applications that have been mentioned for paddle, that this, because of the newness of this, we have had separate advice being taken to support our environmental health team, hence the peer review in this instance. And it's absolutely acknowledged that it does result in, you know, a notable increase on the noise that you get from tennis, because in this instance, the baseline that they're using relates to the fact that this is directly next to tennis courts, and actually in and of itself could be used for tennis as it is now. But you're talking about 50% more noise than tennis. You know, that is recognised, and it's the impact points that are the concern. But that's the specific thing that's been looked at by environmental health and supported by the peer review of the applicant's noise impact assessment. So I absolutely understand the concerns, and I think the proximity of that court, I think it's court 1, but the court that's nearest the neighbours is certainly something that's that's noted. But on the basis of the evidence that we've got, and also the advice that we've got from our environmental health team, is that this is sufficient to achieve what's required in terms of reducing down the impact of that noise.
Thank you. Councillor Boyd.
Thank you, Chair. I was concerned about the noise. What is the noise? Because we keep talking about noise. It's not white noise. It's not loud music. It's a very loud, like a bullet, was what the speaker said. And that's from 8 a.m. till 8 p.m, 12 hours. Not every day, but potentially 8 hours every day from morning to night. Or there's going to be, and it just, for me, that's blindingly obvious that we're already living by tennis courts, so we know how that sounds. I've lived at the back of a tennis court, the Queen's Club, and when Queen's was in full flow, that was noisy, and that was just tennis balls. So I really struggle to believe that this is going to be bearable. It sounds like water torture to me.
Thank you. Councillor Wing.
I'll try and explain the difference. Obviously, I come from a PE background, teaching background, so anything that increases the ability for people to play games, especially at this level, because it's sort of an entry-level racket game. It's very easy to pick up. It can be played by mixed ages and mixed abilities. So, you know, my opinion over increasing facilities for this is that we should be doing all we can, but not at the expense of either wildlife or the people that live around it. So we had pickleball, I think, is a smaller version of tennis. It's not played off the end walls. It's just 2 or 4 people who bat the ball backwards and forwards. I think paddleboard is a game which plays off of the ends. I'm not sure whether it's played off of the sides. So there's definitely an increase of the number of strikes in a game, and the number of strikes are also increased because the court is smaller. So you know, there is a massive increase in noise, not only in terms of the equipment that's used. We had a pickleball court, a pickleball session, it was about 4 years ago that just set up on Spencer Square, which is a tennis court, because you can just mark the courts, pickleball courts. And there was only 1 or 2 sessions at the weekend, but that carried, and as a ward councillor I did get 1 or 2 complaints about that. What I do concern is it's 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. The likelihood is that the people that play pickleball will be playing mostly in the evenings and at weekends, because that's when a lot of people are free, but that's also when people are at home relaxing and trying to enjoy themselves. So I also have concerns. I also note that the Hayne Road pickleball courts are enclosed. They've got I don't think it's substantial because it looks like some kind of tent structure which maybe doesn't have solid walls, but it is there and it does present a first barrier. And I'm so glad Councillor Matterface brought up the bird strike, because an estimated 1 million birds die from window strikes in the UK each year. Over 1 billion die annually in the US. So I find it really quite strange that KCC Ecology haven't picked that issue up, and I do have real concerns because birds don't see the glass, they just see what's beyond it, a tree, and it happens mainly in the morning when they're foraging. So I definitely think that issue needs to be addressed. But obviously if the courts were enclosed, then it would address quite a lot of the issues that we have, including the light issues, which I think will also impact.
Councillor Matterface.
Interestingly, the tennis club can play till 10 o'clock. But of course, as been said, that's a very different game, and they have floodlights. Because I actually had to chase that up because somebody said they thought it was a bit strange they were still playing at 10 o'clock, but they are allowed to play 10 o'clock. The forest that Councillor Garner referred to is going to be placed beyond the outdoor gym. That's what's happening there, I believe. But I want to go back to the parking because in the report, it says there's parking for 40 cars. Somebody who walks through there most days, I can't imagine 40 cars would actually squeeze in there, which means they spill out onto Callis Court Road, they spill out onto Stanley Road, they spill out onto Grange Road, where there is a single yellow line where they shouldn't be parking during the day at all. They spill out into all the side streets, and having walked through when there have been 2 or 3 rugby matches going on, once they take your life in your hands, but you have to negotiate a lot of cars coming and going. And as I mentioned, it's not unusual to have a couple of coaches there. So I would love to see how they get 40 cars in there. But as has been said, they're not adding any extra parking. And with regard to the buses, I doubt very much many of the people would be coming on the loop, but we could but hope. But we've obviously raised some issues. I don't know if anybody else wants to speak, but would it be possible to consider a site visit so we can look in a bit more detail? Would anybody speak?
Okay, I don't have any other speakers at the moment, and so what I'm going to suggest is that we now put the motion for the officer's recommendation for approval to the vote. I would remind members that as a site visit has been mentioned and anything else, we then, if it is refused, then we come back and we can debate whether or not we want a site visit or something else, and then we have another motion. So if you want a site visit, that's how to get it. So you refuse this one and we come back and keep talking. So I'm now going to put the motion for the officer's recommendation for approval to the vote and ask the clerk to set up the electronic voting. That's already done. Thank you. And so that motion has been rejected. Now, just bear with us a minute. He's saying, come to me first. I'll hand over to the Planning Applications Manager.
Thank you. I think, again, very clear members' feeling from the debate about this. Councillor Matterface has mentioned a site visit, and so, again, if that's proposed and voted on, then it's a site visit. But I do think it's been very clear what the issues are, and I would suggest that, similar to the previous item before, the last one, that if members were so minded for officers to try and seek amendments to reduce the provision of the courts adjacent to the neighbouring property on Carras Court Road, it's the idea that you remove Court 1, you then, sorry, no, it's Court 1, it Court 1? Just to be clear, sorry, on there, and provide further information about the potential impact on bird species. Now, obviously, members might not consider that to be sufficient to deal with the highways matters. Obviously, you reduce down the number of people that are going to the site by 25%. There would be the provision potentially then to look at that area to have increased landscaping to hit the BNG targets. There are all sorts of implications that could happen, but that is a suggestion. Members do not have to go with that. If members want to do a site visit or members want to move to refuse the application, they would have to give specific grounds, and we would then come back with a report next time with those. So it is entirely up to members what they want to put forward.
Councillor Packman.
If we did a site visit, and it might be a stupid question, can we get the applicant to bring some paddle equipment? Because I've never heard it, I've never seen it. So we can hear. Because I think a site visit is point. We know what it looks like. I just want to play with it, if I'm being honest.
Too.
But I think if we're going to do a site visit, it has to be beneficial.
Yeah,
I think the main concern is the noise to residents, the parking, things like that. So
can I come back on that? I think that this is actually something that's addressed directly in the noise impact assessment, and the concerns of residents about the noise impact assessment, and indeed the peer review is, how do you replicate what it's actually going to be like until it's there? Yeah, and it's not going to make a difference with paddle equipment on site if you've not got the structures that the noise hits and makes the impact on. So that's why it's modelled by, again, the technical aspect of the noise assessment. So there is obviously an appreciation when you go out on site to see the exact nature of that closeness and that relationship. And if it was a site visit, then obviously I hope the applicant will obviously have seen this discussion and think about their proposal. You know, inevitably the reason why it's 4 courts is the business model. You know, there is, and therefore, you know, there is really positive support for this under planning policy and guidance. So that, I suppose, is why there is a middle ground to try and seek a solution. But obviously I take the point that there are very specific concerns of members about a number of different points, and whether or not the suggested amendments would deal with that is a matter for you to consider.
If I can just make my own comment at this point, I would suggest that seeking a solution as the first option is probably preferable to a site visit as the first option. If we go out on a site visit, we are likely to come back and still be asking to seek a solution, I suspect. And that's my feeling on it. But I'm only one person here as far as the voting on that is concerned. Now, Councillor Wing, you wanted to come in, and there was...
Yeah, I'm still.
Someone else.
I mean, it's got to be an economically viable site, and if you reduce the courts, you reduce the economic viability of that. You know, you can do that by having groups of people who turn up and play tournaments, so you increase the number in the cafe. What I can't understand is why it's not enclosed, and there may be a financial aspect to that. Because if it's enclosed, it solves most of the problems we're addressing. And I think by just removing one court, you're fiddling around the edges that may impact its viability, and you're not really addressing seriously enough some of the issues. I mean, it would be good to bounce some balls. We can't replicate that. I would have said 16 people playing on a court and then we go and sit in somebody's garden. But we can't do that. But it seems to me that we've already got the Hayne Road that is enclosed. And I'm assuming we had the money, and the reason it's enclosed is for the very reasons we sat here. And so I can't understand why that site isn't enclosed unless it's financial.
So, yeah, I mean, the proposal is what's been put in front of us. So in terms of requiring that to mitigate it, there is obviously a cost implication. The applicant could simply say it's just not viable to do so. It's also about the height that it has to be for it to work, and actually not even work as a mitigation process, just in terms of to have a paddle court. And that has a visual impact on the public open space. So there are all sorts of other things that would result from that. You know, ultimately, yeah, it's been proposed as it has. The question is obviously whether or not amendments are sought to effectively just reduce the provision. It does allow for potentially negotiation around whether or not it's sufficient if, for example, the court that is Court 1 were to become actually a singles court rather than being able to be played for doubles, which is what happens in paddle as well. But ultimately, that is not the feeling I'm getting from members in terms of the proximity of the impact and whether or not you can actually get both meaningful landscaping in there but potentially additional attenuation, if possible, or indeed if viable. So, yeah.
Councillor Joanne Bright next.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the quick point that there were originally 3 courts there. So that's 3 courts that potentially would be doubles, so that's 12 players. So it makes sense that there's 3 courts there, not 4 courts, to me, in my mind.
And Councillor Packman?
Yeah, I think it's not our job to find the solution. I think it's for us to push back and say we're not happy. It's for the applicant to go away, come back to us with a solution, and then us to then re-decide if the solution is good enough. So I think I would like to propose that we do that, is exactly what Ian said. and actually go back to the applicant and say, this is what the committee have said, come back in however many months, and we'll redecide in however many months. And I'm still happy to go on a site visit because, you know, happy to see it. But I think I'd like to just propose that we just do that and let the applicant decide how they're going to, you know, whether they take councillor wings and close it and, you know, whatever. But I think we let the applicant decide all that because we could be here all night otherwise.
Well, Mr Livingstone will have some wording written on his piece of paper, I suspect. No, maybe not.
I suppose, so what I was talking about specifically was to seek amendments to reduce the provision of courts adjacent to the neighbouring property and to provide further information about the issue to do with bird strike that's been provided. Now, it doesn't mean that that's what will happen in terms of amendments that we receive. It may be that it's been put forward and they say, well, we can't make any amendments, and then we bring it back for determination on the basis of what we've got, or an alternative may come forward. That may result in us having to reconsult neighbours. Certainly if a roof goes on the top of that, that is a significant change that would require reconsultation for the nature of the proposal. But I think with what members are saying, that the sort of potential motion could be to defer to officers to seek amendments to reduce the provision of courts adjacent to the neighbours on Callis Court Road and provide further information on the potential impact on bird species from the use of glazing. So that would be my wording. If anyone proposes it, or do you think that's... Let me rephrase. So to keep it's got to be precise so that the applicant knows what they're doing, but at the same time, I appreciate the point that's been raised. The flexibility is needed for alternatives to come forward. So to seek amendments to reduce the impact on neighbouring properties and to provide further information on potential impact on bird species and use of glazing. The one thing about that is I would work on the basis that if you reduce the provision and the number of courts down by 25%, you simply reduce the highway issue as well. We consider the highway issue sufficient. I appreciate others don't, but it would clearly reduce the impact if you've got one less court. So that would be I would suggest something that the applicant should look at first of all. But if you had the wording that it's to seek amendments to reduce the impact on neighbouring properties, it gives us the flexibility to move forward. So we need a proposer. Can we get a proposer?
So does anyone want to propose that, Councillor Packman, and a second, Councillor Boyd? So I will now hand over to the clerk to set up the electronic voting. She's beaten me to it again. Oh, hang on a minute. I can't hear you.
Is it possible for me to make one last comment or question?
Well, we've had a motion put.
No.
We've had a motion and it's been seconded.
Okay,
So,
no worries.
We need to vote, and we need to do it fast.
Just reduce the impact on.
Thank you. So that is carried. That is deferred back to officers to various changes. Sorry, Councillor Matterface, you?
I was going to ask if you explain to those who've come, the objector and the other people, exactly.
Yes, so it will be going back to officers to renegotiate the design layout, whatever it is that is achievable in line with the issues that we have raised and discussed this evening. So we don't quite know what that will look like yet. That will be down to whatever comes back either next month or as soon as possible. Obviously, we try to get it to bring back as soon as we can. Is that okay?
Could I just ask, that means now the motion has been defeated in the sense that the application has been refused, and it's now up to the developers to make an appeal But they...
No. No,
what is it then?
It's not completely refused. It has been defeated in its current format, but the developers will discuss with the officers alternative use and provision of how they provide the paddle courts. And that is down to the developers and the officers to discuss.
No, anything to say?
I'm just going to hand over to Mr. Livingston. He can cover that.
Thank you.
bit
Sorry,
better.
I can pick this up after the meeting separately, but the application is still on hand. It's still part of the planning register. It hasn't been determined. I think that's the key point. The application hasn't been determined. It will come back to members for the ultimate determination of whether or not it is approved in an amended form or it is refused. So it will still come back to members to do that. But the application is still live on that basis. I'm happy to pick up any separate comments, questions after the meeting.
Okay, thank you. So we just thank you to everyone for waiting. Those whose application has now been determined can leave if you wish, or you can stay. We will just need to take a couple of minutes whilst the Vice Chair and I do our bit and I get out of here. Thank you.
Councillor Packman, can we get going, please? Councillor Crittenden, could you get seated because we need to get this bit going. Thank you. Right, we come to agenda item A02, Winter Gardens, Fort Crescent, Margate, Kent, CT9 1HX. Speaking in favour, we have Philip Ivory. Mr. Ivory, you have 3 minutes if you would like to speak now, and you will be timed by the clerk. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. My name is Philip Ivory. I'm a planning consultant at LEP, speaking on behalf of the applicant. Firstly, we'd like to thank the planning team at Thanet District Council, who have worked positively and collaboratively with the applicant. This application seeks listed building consent for the repair, conservation and extension to the Grade 2 listed Margate Winter Gardens. It sits alongside the full planning application, which we anticipate to reach committee in September. The proposed scheme will bring the Winter Gardens back into use as a major regional and national theatre venue, supported by the introduction of new secondary uses. Of the new uses include a rooftop restaurant positioned on the seafront above the new extension to the main hall, a nursery positioned at the former box office, a drama school, and a revitalised cafe and bar provision throughout the site. The proposed development has been carefully developed, having regard to the building's historic significance. In this case, it has been concluded that the proposed works will result in some harm to the significance of the building. However, when this is weighed against the benefits, this harm is outweighed in compliance with local and national planning policy. The scheme will have economic, social and environmental benefits for Margate and the wider district through the reuse of a vacant heritage asset, notwithstanding the fact that national planning policy gives substantial weight to the conservation of heritage assets. Furthermore, the restoration and repair of the building to secure the building's long-term reuse after a period of vacancy provides clear heritage benefits for a Grade 2 listed building. It is confirmed that there are no outstanding technical objections from consultees on this application, and the scheme is compliant with both national and local planning policy. Historic England and the Theatre Trust both provided support to the proposals within their responses. Furthermore, the applicant and design team have sustained dialogue with Thanet's Conservation Officer from the pre-app stage to determination or to today. Overall, it is considered that the proposal represents an acceptable form of development that will enable the continued primary use of the building as a theatre, alongside the additional amenities provided by the restaurant, nursery and drama school. The revitalisation of the Winter Gardens presents a transformative vision for the Thanet community, poised to significantly enhance social impact and elevate the quality of life for local residents. By repurposing this iconic space into a multifaceted hub of culture, education and leisure, the applicant aims to foster a vibrant and inclusive community spirit. Furthermore, there are no technical objections from consultees, demonstrating the acceptability of the scheme. For those reasons, members, I encourage you to follow the officer's recommendation and approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ivory. Speaking against the application, we have Ian Driver. Mr. Driver, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. The Winter Gardens was built in 1911, and since then it's been repeatedly remodelled and rebuilt. And most of that work was undertaken before modern asbestos law applied. So there's a significant risk that this building contains asbestos. The officer report, if it's approved, permits extensive development and demolition and rebuilding. If asbestos is present in the building, those works are inevitably likely to disrupt it, releasing this deadly mineral into the air breathed by residents on Fort Crescent, by visitors and staff, by passers-by on the promenade, and if the scheme proceeds, by the babies and children in the proposed nursery. I've read the 26-page officer report, and not once does the word asbestos appear. Not one of the 14 recommended conditions requires an asbestos survey before demolition. Asbestos risk from demolition is a well-established material planning consideration. Under Regulation 6 of the Control of Asbestos Regulations 2012, no demolition or refurbishment work may begin in a building that may contain asbestos until a survey has been carried out and the works have been authorised by the Planning Committee, and they cannot just be left to building control. It's got to be a decision of this committee. The report records that one objection has been received. I submitted an objection on the 3rd of June that specifically raised the asbestos risk. My objection is not the one summarised and referenced in the officer's report, and it's not before you tonight. You've been asked to decide on an incomplete report. The council is the freeholder of the Winter Gardens, and it's got a powerful financial interest in transferring it to a leaseholder and saving the expensive mothballing costs. In 2021, the High Court quashed a planning permission granted by this council on land in which the council had a financial interest.
Mr. Driver, you've had your 3 minutes. So
sorry, you did let the other people overrun.
Have you got just a little bit to add?
Yes, just a little bit. 2 paragraphs and some recommendations. In 2021, the High Court quashed the planning permission granted to the council by land in which it had a financial interest, and that was on the grounds of apparent bias with £35,000.
Thank you.
Look, you did extend
You've
this
had
time
your
to others.
3.5 minutes, Mr.
You
Driver.
let the other councillor have longer. You did.
We have finished. Thank you.
We haven't. I'll just give you the 3 concerns I've got.
No.
I'm asking you to defer, and I'll make some suggestions.
You're finished. We're going to move on. We're going to move on, Mr.
Report is deferred until a full asbestos report is brought back
Yeah,
to the
thank you.
committee, and there should be a site visit to see what the asbestos report said in person.
Thank you.
Thank you. Look forward to coming to the next meeting.
Thank you. We'll now move on to Councillor Crittenden, speaking under 20.1.
Thank you, Chair. My position on this application is neutral. I've worked backstage at this venue before now, and no matter how well we think we know this building, it is extraordinarily complex, much greater than the space ever seen by the general public. My first inclination is to think that in order to truly visualise the impact of the changes proposed, both inside and out, is that this venue would very much benefit from a site visit. The only part of the application I wish to comment on is the proposed nursery, which has garnered some public comment and concern, including because it will be a part of a licensed premises. For the most part, those concerns don't directly relate to tonight's listed building consent application, which focuses on the impact of the additional structure on the listed building itself. However, there is some overlap. The applicants are experienced at running children's nurseries, including at least one which is co-located in a property with an alcohol licence. They have stated in the design and access statement that safeguarding considerations have been met in the design. From what I have seen of the plans, they probably have. However, it is unusual for a children's nursery to be co-located with a fully public building with theatre, restaurants and bars, which I believe will attract greater scrutiny by Ofsted when the time comes to secure their registration. Whilst I appreciate the considerations of another agency are not within the remit of planning, if I were a member of the committee for this item, I would still be looking for some reassurance that the Ofsted requirement that the nursery premises will be secure and fully separated from the other functions of the co-located property as part of the safeguarding requirements to be met. Simply because if that criteria is not met, it will impact on the applicant's business plan, which could in turn result in design changes that may have a further impact on the listed building. Ultimately, it is the applicant's responsibility to get it right, but it is better to get it right first time, and I only ask that you bear this in mind where you can. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Crittenden. And I ask you to move to the members' room. Thank you. And I will ask the Principal Planning Officer to outline the report.
Thank you. So this is the site, so Winter Gardens. This is a location plan. So the application is the red outline shown on this plan. A few photos of the site. So this is the view from Fort Crescent looking down onto the Winter Gardens. In this location here, the proposal includes the demolition of this small part of the building on the side here, which forms a corridor. This is taken on looking towards the other side of the building. So again, from this view, there's very few changes to the actual building from this view. And then this is looking back towards the existing lobby going down the staircase to the centre of the building. So as part of the proposal that it's looking to remove this roofed area, but this area here would remain as existing. And then now going into the site itself, so going down the access road to the side, again looking towards the staircase and then the building on the right-hand side. So this is now on the roof, looking towards one of the remaining original historic elevations. So obviously the building has been extended a number of times over the years. So this is one of the original elevations from the original building. So the proposal for this is these are currently vents that are hidden behind this existing sort of boarding, and these would be retained as vents, but there is a proposal to provide some mechanical ventilation on the roof in this location here, which you'll see later on the plans. And you can see there's these planters in the front here, so the proposal is to remove some of the planters because there's a need to recover the roof. So there's a temporary removal of these planters as part of the proposal, and then the replacement of the roof because of there's current issues with damage to the roof. Then this is on the other side, looking towards the same elevation. So again, similar proposal for this one. Again, there would be mechanical ventilation in this location here, and again, the planters would be removed and replaced. This is then looking back, so that was the elevation on the left-hand side here. Then in this location, again, there's a need to do some alterations to this area here and provide some increased guarding with new railings around this planter here. And then this is now looking from above back onto the roof. So again, very few changes from looking towards this photo. All of the building here remains other than the roof on the staircase in the distance. And then again, looking towards the building again here. So you can see there's some existing railings that run along the promenade, and the proposal seeks to replace and repair the railings that run along adjacent to the building. Now this is looking towards the northern side of the building. So you have the lower promenade in this location here. So this building is to be removed as part of the, this part of the building is to be removed as part of the proposal. And then looking again towards the existing building. So as part of the proposal, this extension here is being removed. So this is an extension to the original building. This is part of the original building and is remaining. And then the proposal would be to remove this part and to build a new extension in this location here, and this area become a roof terrace. Now going down onto the lower promenade. So again, the building is in this location here. So as we approach it, on the left here, this area here is to be demolished, but this area here would be remained, and there'll just be alterations to the windows. So all of the small structures sticking out from the building would be removed, and some of the staircases would be removed, and then that would be reconfigured with a new public realm space. And then this is the extension, which again will be removed and rebuilt through the application. And then again, just a closer view of that. So again, this area would go, the stairs here would all go, and this would all be replaced. And then this structure here, again, the windows improved and replaced there. And this is taken from the other side. So you can see the existing design of this extension. So it's quite sort of blank elevation. There's no interaction from this rear elevation with the lower promenade. You can see the fire escapes in this location here. So it's all quite unattractive from the northern view of the building. This would also be removed as part of the proposal. And then on the right-hand side, this extension would be retained. And again, the windows would be replaced as part of the application. So this is now internally just inside the building. So one of the main, when considering the significance of the building as a Grade 2 listed building, is mainly this room within the building. So as part of the application, there's very few alterations being made to this building. It will basically remain as existing, other than some alterations to the balcony areas, the removal of some of the radiators in this location here, and then some changes at roof level in these areas where the vents are on the left, and on the right-hand side, this would become glazing, which is how it would have been originally. So this is looking towards the existing extension. So this is the extension to be demolished in the distance here, and then again would be replaced with an extension of a similar size. And then again, a view of that. So again, this is the extension here. So you can see there's no historic merit within this building. There's no historic features, and it is a sort of more modern extension that has been added to the building. So from this point here, this would remain. This was the wall of the original building. And you can see here, this is where there are some, like a wall that basically is below ground level that extends up into this area. So this area could be sectioned off from the rear part of the building. So you'll see that again on the floor plans. Then looking towards these areas, again, this would all be removed, the ventilations in this area here, and the vents would be retained, and some mechanical equipment, newer kind of mechanical equipment in order to create air conditioning within the building would be located externally. And then again here, and then for and then in this location here as well. So this is looking towards Fort Crescent, these openings. Right, so now moving on to the plan. So this image shows you the proposed demolition works for the building. So starting with the top of the slide, you can see the roof covering over the staircase, that's being removed. You can see that side corridor that I pointed out in the photo, which is in this location here. You can see this, which is a 1940s spot box, which was on the building, providing lighting for the shows. That's being removed. The extension here, which is a 1930s extension with the staircases. These areas here and on the left here. So that's the everything for demolition. And these are the floor plans for the demolition, so you can just see clearly externally and internally what's proposed for demolition. So this is the main hall plan, so again the area of greatest significance within the building. So you can see within that open space there's very few changes. These are the radiators being removed. This is the ground floor extension being removed. Just some alterations to windows around the edge of these extensions, and otherwise it's mainly just reconfiguration of toilet space within these areas, and some removal of some more modern walls, so no structural walls are being removed. Then on the next floor, the Queen's Hall plan. So whilst on the next level, still within the main hall space, the proposal is to do some changes to the balcony areas to create a new seating space. So the existing seating would be removed in both balcony areas and replaced with new sort of more luxurious seating. And again, I've got some images of those to show you. And then again, the removal of the corridor in this location here. But again, otherwise, the actual Queen's Hall plan is pretty much the same. Again, very few changes within that space, other than, again, within the WC areas and changing spaces at the rear here. So just to show you the balcony area, so this is existing chairs for the balcony area. So these would all be removed. And then this is a sort of an alcove area to the top of that balcony space. And then the proposal is to replace that with this new seating, so the image shown on the right-hand side here, but the actual plan on the left-hand side. So there would be seating with new tables, lamps, to try and provide a more sort of attractive space at that upper level. And then the bottom right-hand image just shows what would be happen within that alcove space. It would just be some refreshments would be provided within that space to provide sort of access to that balcony area. Then at the lobby level demolition, so this is now the roof of this space here. You can see the planters in red that have been demolished. Again, the corridor area here being demolished. And then within this area to the front of the space, there's quite a few internal walls that have been removed. But again, this is one of the most modern extensions currently on the building. So there's very few concerns with any of the demolition within this space in terms of a heritage point of view. So now just looking at, again, sorry, I'm repeating myself slightly, but again, looking at this corridor space here, that was it externally, and that's it internally. So again, this is being demolished, but you can see from this photo, there's no historic merit within that extension itself. And then looking at the roof plan, I mean, actually, I might just pass on the roof plan because it's very similar again to what I've already shown you. So now moving on to the proposed extension works, this is now what's proposed. So again, to the north of the slide, you can see there's two extensions in this location here, which are single story. Then on the side facing the lower promenade, we have the new single story extension replacing the existing extension, and then a new first floor extension above that with some staircases in this location here. And then there's a new entrance area, which is an upper promenade level to provide access into that space. So again, you can see that from the other view on the right-hand side here. So just going through the proposed floor plans. This is the proposed main hall floor plan. So this is the new ground floor extension that's being added onto the building. So rather than the photo that you saw where it had a very blank frontage at the back, this will now be fully glazed at ground floor level and provide bifolding doors that would open up onto the lower promenade. And then within the space, it's probably very difficult to see on this plan, which is quite busy, but it's again, the changes are mainly providing new toilet spaces, some changes to the bar area within the Jubilee space to better access to those toilets there. And then on the right-hand side, again, similarly, there's some changes in the right-hand side here in the seaside bar and lounge area, where there's, again, some changes with the WC space in there. And then in terms of the Queen's Hall floor plan, again, there's few changes here. So again, the changes at the balcony level, and then just some changes within the WC space. in this central area. And then on the lobby level, so on this plan you can see the location of the proposed mechanical equipment on the roof. So this is next to the existing historical sort of elevation here. So there was concern raised with the conservation officer to the location of this here, and we have had discussions with the applicant about whether that's the best location for it, whether there's anywhere else that can go that would have a lesser impact on the significance of the building. But unfortunately, it does seem that that is the only location that this could be provided in order to achieve the air conditioning that's needed within the building to bring it up to modern standards. So we have therefore looked at whether there's ways that this can be mitigated in terms of the visual impact, and consideration's been given to the powder coating of the equipment to try and tie it in with the colour of the listed building, which is obviously rendered a beige colour. And then also in terms of these planters here that I'd mentioned being removed, those are now proposed to be replaced and potentially increased in height in order to provide some light screening of this area. And this would be mainly at lower level below the sill level of those windows. The equipment isn't actually being approved through this application. We have conditioned for details of that to come in because the exact size and design of that equipment is unknown at this time. So there's lots of stringent conditions attached to the recommendation that would look for us to sort of consider the design and location of that in further detail through the condition submission. And then this is the roof plan. So looking on the north here, you can see, again, the first floor extension and then the restaurant area in this location here. So just to show, now looking at the design of it, so this is a historic photo showing how the building looked from the lower promenade in 1912. So the right-hand side is probably a bit clearer and showing how it interacted with the lower promenade. So it was originally, there was originally glaze indoors and you could access the lower promenade. There was a raised terrace area and you can see the stairs, so much sort of nicer environment than it currently is. So this is now the proposed design as part of the application for the extension. So the top image is the existing elevation. So again, you can see the very blank elevation there with just the fire staircases. And then the bottom is the proposed elevation onto the lower promenade. So the design for the extension is there will be bifold doors which will be aluminium framed. You can see there's raised band detailing along the top of the building here. And then there's vents above this space as well to provide ventilation into the building. And then these doors would all open outwards, creating open spaces onto this public realm space, which is being provided to the front of the building. The extension at first floor level is above that. So you can see here from this direction, it's fully glazed from this view. It's set back. Again, there's been some negotiation on the size of this. So originally it was slightly wider, but we felt that it needed to be restricted to the width of the existing extension and extend no further to the side, where again, there's these the original historic elevation in this location here and here. And then you can see above the roof the entrance to the restaurant at upper promenade level in this location here. And I'll show you some more detailed images in a moment. So looking at it from above, so again, from this point of view, the biggest concern is trying to protect this rear elevation, which is the original historic elevation. Here, there's limited concern because this is already an extension. It's just being replaced with a new extension, so the actual impact of the listed buildings is very minimal and actually is potentially an enhancement from the improved design that we'd achieve here. But trying to look at this elevation, obviously the first floor extension is being added onto here, and that is considered to be a harm to the significance of the listed building by adding that extension onto it and by attaching to that original elevation. But what the applicant is looking to do is to retain that wall inside the extension, replace the ventilation in these openings here with glazing, which would have to be toughened glass because these are the windows I showed you from inside that go into the main hall. So that would have to be toughened glass in that location there and potentially blackened out as well to prevent impact to the performances. But otherwise, by being glazed, it does mean that you are able to have views through to that original elevation, and so that still would be retained, and people going into the restaurant would still be able to see that original form. So there is considered to be limited harm because of the fact that is being retained and there's little impact to the historic fabric. So this elevation on the bottom here, that's the internal elevation inside the extension. So again, showing the retention of those windows and the retention of all of the cornicing above the windows. So the conservation officer is happy with that. Then this is the view now from Fort Crescent looking towards the building. So again, this is the existing at the top and the proposed at the bottom. So the main changes again is just having this mechanical equipment in this location here and in here. But as I've mentioned to you already, there are plans in place to try and mitigate the harm from that. These are the side elevations. So this is the existing on the left and the proposed on the right. So this is the single-story extension in this location here. So in this view, you can see how it's similar in scale to the existing. And then this is the proposed first floor extension. And there's also new external staircases proposed either side of the extension. And then again, this is the access from Upper Promenade, which would contain a lift providing disabled access into the first floor extension. And then again, the other side view looking towards the extension again. So again, the proposal's on the bottom here. So looking towards the upper new extension, so where the lift is going to be. So this is the location of it, and this location here. So obviously it's quite open at the moment, and you can look straight across. But now this will be blocked partly by the new staircases and the pop-up entrance. So these are the intended designs for the staircases, which would be metal staircases, colour yet to be agreed. But of a design that will tie in with the railings that are going to be used on the public realm area. We had gone back for further justification on the staircases and on the proposed entrance area, because obviously there is again some harm because of having this structure now here. So this is the structure showing the platform lift inside it and the lobby area and the internal staircase. And then these are the new external staircases either side of it. This bottom right-hand side is an image showing how this would look. So the intention is that the existing lobby building that's on Fort Crescent, you can see on the left-hand side of this image, they've used that same design to provide this one. So there's a tie-in with the existing building, and they're actually level as well, so they're in a line with one another. So this is one side and that's the other side in a line with one another, and of a similar scale with the same overhang as you can see there. And they would be clad in metal. So the central image is showing the potential material that would be used to clad that structure. So yeah, further justification was sought for this, whether there was any way that this could all be done internally or whether a lift could go from lower level. And there has been further justification submitted as part of the application to prove that it would really be difficult to do anything other than this proposal without causing greater harm to the listed building, because anything internally would damage the historic fabric. And again, this, in terms of the external staircases, this is the minimum size staircases that they could achieve without having sort of a larger space. If it was going down to the lower promenade level, they'd have to have a much bigger staircase going down to that level. So on balance, having had all the justification submitted, it is considered that that is potentially the best scenario we're going to get for achieving the disabled access that's needed to the first floor level. Then in terms of looking at the other end of the building, so this is now towards Fort Crescent, so you've come down the existing steps towards the centre of the building, which would be in this location here, and the proposal is for a new extension on either side. So these extensions are similar to the extension that's existing. You can see the height's very similar, although it's a slightly more modern in design and would have the metal cladding attached to it and would be have more glazing within it as well. And then you can see it from, so this is the rear of, the bottom image is the proposed, and is the rear of that area. So the extensions are on the left and right-hand side here. And then this is the side view. So the extension, again, is in this location here. So again, this existing extension is the most modern extension. This has been attached to it. So in terms of the actual impact of the listed building, this is considered quite minor. It's on an area of hard surfacing, so there's limited impact to the landscaping within the site. And the design is considered to be sort of a good design, contemporary design that works well with the existing building. And then again, that's the other view with that extension there. So that's just showing the existing steps going up. So this is again the roof that's going to be coming off, which takes it back to how it was originally. So historic photos have shown that this was originally just steps, it wasn't covered. So actually that's a benefit by removing this roof area above it. And then to the top, the doors would be removed. So again, you can see in this photo is like UPVC doors. They'd be removed and replaced with some railings, which railing gates, which would open up to the staircase and potentially provide security when it's closed, but would allow for views through of that space, but otherwise the structure's being retained. So the last thing is just a public realm space. So again, this is the area on the lower promenade, and the proposal is to provide an improved public realm space in this location here. So this is the plan for that area. So this is the proposed ground floor plan, again, that would replace the existing, and then all of this would be a raised like terrace area with seating, as in like step seating, that you could sit on, and then these are steps here, and then ramps for the disabled access in this location here. So all of that trying to provide a better relationship with the existing, with the building. In terms of this space, the aim is for this to be a flexible space, so this could be open during the day, but also would be flexible to be used as part of the venue. And then that's just an image showing the public realm space as well out there. So other points that have just been raised. So since the application has been on the agenda, we've had a few objections. One relates to asbestos, and one is related to the Equalities Act. So in terms of asbestos, whilst it's considered that whilst public safety can be a material consideration in some contexts, the Control of Asbestos Regulations 2012 provides a regime for managing asbestos. The planning authority is entitled to rely on this separate regulatory framework to address asbestos issues, rather than treating them as a ban to granting planning permission, and the planning system should not duplicate controls that are the responsibility of other bodies in this case, which would be the Health and Safety Executive and Building Control. So it's not considered that there is a need for an asbestos survey to have been submitted. However, in any case, we are aware that the applicant has been carrying out inspections. We have been notified that inspections and samples in relation to asbestos have been carried out on site, particularly in relation to the actual extensions to be demolished. And therefore, in terms of the impact on the listed building from that would have very limited impact, because already considering the demolition of that extension. In terms of the Equalities Act, so Section 149 of the Equalities Act 2012 requires the Council, in exercising its planning functions, to have due need to eliminate discrimination, advance equality of opportunity between persons who share a relevant protected characteristic and persons who do not share it, and foster good relations between different groups. Officers have given due regard to the requirements of the public sector equality duty in considering this application, and having assessed the nature of the proposed development and its potential impacts, officers have concluded that there are no particular equalities considerations arising from this application that would affect the recommendation. The policies for consideration through this application is policy H03 of the Thanet local plan. Which sets out that the council supports the retention of local heritage assets, including structures, features and gardens of local interest, and that proposals that affect designated heritage assets should be assessed by reference to the scale of harm or loss of the significance of the assets, in accordance with criteria set out in the MPPF. The new MPPF that's now been introduced, policy HE6 within the MPPF, states that where development proposals would harm the significance of a designated heritage asset, the effect on the asset and its significance should be weighed against any public benefits resulting from the proposal, and important public benefits can include securing the long-term reuse of a vacant listed building. This is a vacant listed building. There are benefits from having these extensions added onto the building to help bring the building back into use. The actual use isn't being considered through this application, it's being considered through the other pending full application, which will become before members at a later planning committee. We are only considering the impact of the listed building as part of this application. I've obviously mentioned to you that some of the extensions will cause some harm to the significance of the building, but there's also lots of benefits from the enhancements that would result from the new extensions that are being added and the improved designs of those extensions. So the benefits in this instance are considered to outweigh the harm and are considered to comply with policy HE03 of the Thanet local plan and the MPPF, and therefore it is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Now, looking at the time, it's 10:25. I think it's unlikely we're going to finish by 10:30. So could I have a proposer and a seconder that we continue to no later than 11:30? Councillor Packman and Councillor J. Bright. Thank you. We have to now vote that we're prepared to continue a little bit longer. Oh, we'll do it by show of hands. We continue the meeting rather than adjourn it, and if needs be, continue at 11:30. If we don't finish by 11:30, we'll have to come back next week. So, yep, okay. Thank you. Thanks, Charles. So, thank you for that. I move that the officer's recommendation is adopted. So, I now need somebody to second that. And Councillor Packman seconded. And I will now put this to the debate if people wish to debate the motion. Councillor Garner, you were first.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we obviously all want to see the Winter Gardens back in operation. It's been a great venue over the years, as mentioned, over 100 years, I believe. And I have to admit, if it hadn't been raised by Mr. Driver and others, I wouldn't have thought about asbestos. But now it has been raised, and it is something that I think is important that we're satisfied ourselves about. So I would like a bit of clarity, I think, about what work has been done and what work needs to be done to satisfy us that there is any asbestos that might be there is being identified and that it is being removed appropriately. So I think you mentioned that there has been some surveying done already of whether there is asbestos, and that would be covered by the health and safety executive as to how it would be removed. But has any been identified? I mean, so there's been some surveying done. Has any been identifying? And can you confirm what our role as a planning committee is? Because I'm a bit conflicted, having looked it up hastily, that it is whether or not it is a matter for us to consider. I mean, I personally want to assure myself that we're not approving something that could then result in asbestos not being dealt with appropriately, and then there being an issue that we could have done something about previously. So that's the first thing, really.
So just on the first point, we don't have a submission on the asbestos because we haven't requested a submission on the asbestos because, as I've mentioned, it is covered under separate legislation and Builder Control would look at it as part of their submission, and our Builder Control team are involved in this site. All I have is an email that I've been passed by the Conservation Officer who has been sent this by the applicant in terms of the investigation works that's being carried out, and I believe from memory that they'd said that there was potentially 4 areas within the extension where there could potentially be some asbestos that they were investigating and sampling. And obviously they have to do that because they're going to be demolishing the building, and at that point that's where it's more dangerous if you're demolishing and there's the asbestos there, so they need to make sure they are removing that carefully. So clearly they are looking into that and dealing with that under the required legislation, but I don't have any specific details because we wouldn't normally request it.
Okay, sorry, can I just so as I fully understand, or so as we fully understand. So the building control, would they get involved before anything starts happening then to mandate condition how the asbestos is removed and how it's dealt with before actually it starts being done?
So Building Control are involved in this project already, so they're part of that process. And obviously, in terms of asbestos management, as Emma's mentioned already, it's a matter for the duty holder under the control of asbestos regulations, which is obviously enforced by the Health and Safety Executive. So in terms of survey work that they've got to do, they have to do that under those regulations. So the point that we've raised is that for a listed building consent application, we would not be expected nor required to duplicate that requirement as a consideration under the Listed Building and Conservation Act. So on that basis, we are satisfied that the correct regulatory regime is in place to manage that particular issue.
So would that be, there's another planning application coming, isn't there?
So this isn't a planning application, just to be very clear,
No,
listed building consent. But yes, there is a
There
counterpart,
is a
full planning application which will consider the uses, all of the normal planning impacts, etc. Whether or not by the time that comes there's more information about asbestos, there may well be, because obviously the site is mobilised at the moment, and if there is, we can provide that information. But I would still be giving you the same recommendation for the planning application that I am now, in so much as that the regulations are very clear that deal with asbestos in terms of the planning system's interaction with such a thing. And obviously if something, I mean, similar to some of the issues that we've had already, if something were to transpire that means that it would change the nature of the listed building consent that we've granted to accord with those other regulations, because something was discovered, they would have to come back to us to change the listed building consent that they've got consent for, to make the amendments that were needed to deal with something under a separate regulatory framework. So again, this is why, again, that's the separate cover for if we were to grant something that you can't do because you're breaching legislation separately, you'd have to come back to make the change and make the change to the listed building consent to deal with that issue.
Packman, sorry.
That's right.
It's very late.
I've been called worse. Don't worry about that. Look, I think this is transformative. I definitely agree that it benefits. The benefit outweighs the harm. I think this will be brilliant for the local area, brilliant for businesses. We've seen so many businesses, hotels affected because it's closed. It should never have closed, but that's a different political debate. We won't get into that tonight. I do agree with Councillor Garner, and I'm glad that Mr. Driver has kind of brought it to us as a committee, because I think it's something that a bit like you, I would never have thought of it. But I'm glad that it is being looked into. I think that's reassuring. If you'd have said to me, I don't know, or no, it hasn't, I think I'd be saying, hang on a minute, this isn't safe. Because I do agree that people in the local area, once this has been knocked down, could potentially be at harm. What I would like to maybe suggest, because I don't want to hold any work up with the Winter Gardens, otherwise it's just another building that's becoming more and more derelict and not used, is could we condition something around the asbestos report? So the asbestos report has to be added to the planning application, so when it comes back to us, we can go, actually, we are satisfied that that is there. I am confident that this is being done, because I don't disbelieve our officers, but I think it would just give that reassurance to the public and to everyone that's going to be using it that this is safe. So is it a condition that we can put on the report to say we want to see the surveys?
Over to Ian.
Thank you, Chair. So there is a condition which relates specifically to the demolition, having a strategy to protect the remaining listed structure in the course of works. That's not a demolition method statement. What I would say is that under normal delegated authority, what we sometimes do is we have informatives that we put on an application to basically say, flag things up. So it would sometimes say things like, you can appeal this decision if you wish, if it's a refusal. In this instance, we could certainly add an informative to say the applicant is reminded of the requirements under the control of asbestos, and actually flag up very prominently that there is a separate bit of legislation that has to be accorded to. To be clear, they are aware of it. It's literally something that they're looking at, and obviously, as you've heard, in terms of the conservation officer giving information that's already there. So we wouldn't consider a condition is justified. We would just be replicating another regime. So it would just be an informative to flag up other legislation.
Councillor Packman.
I think I just, a bit like Councillor Garner, just want that reassurance. I think I'm satisfied with the reassurance that actually they have to do this under the law. This isn't something they can just ignore, and actually if they did ignore, there's serious consequences here. So I think that's what I was looking for, is a reassurance from from our officers. But you know, the surveys would have been helpful. Just saying.
Thank you. Who else wishes to speak on the committee?
I mean, having sat on overview and scrutiny last night and the mess that is Arlington Towers, where we are the freeholder, I think we have to make sure that we are over scrutinising this situation. And I do also have concerns about asbestos. And according to the Cabinet, and wonder if there are, I'm surely there should be, because we've owned this building for a very long time, whether there are any previous asbestos reports that should be made available to the developers. And I also note that in the Cabinet report of the 20th of March 2025, 2.7, over subsequent period, the Council completed a comprehensive suite of surveys and studies to inform the opportunities of future of winter gardens. These included, there's a long list, one of them was asbestos air sampling survey, which, you know, it may not inform us of much, or the new owners, the new leaseholders of much, but I certainly think there any previous, I would like to know if there's any previous full asbestos survey, and given that a large amount of the building is going to be demolished. I mean, I was unfortunate to find a small section of asbestos, or my builder did, and he down tools straight away, and it would cost me quite a large sum of money to get it not only removed in a airtight negative air source doodah thingy, but by DDS, but also I got certification that it had been disposed of, including the boots that the guys wore. So it is a serious matter, and I'm glad it was brought to our attention, because, you know, it's not necessarily the thing that we think we should be talking about as people on the committee. And the other thing I'd like to reassurance over is that there is clear separation between the nursery and the selling of alcohol and the other activities, which I don't think are compatible as an ex-teacher. Those are the two areas of concern, and I would support Mr. Packman's, Councillor Packman's, that we could simply solve this by having some sort of condition that would protect, not only protect what's going on that site and the environment and people, but it would also protect us as a council going forward, because we remain the freeholders.
Can I just come back on the protecting the council? This is just any other applicant to planning committee. It's really important that that's the case, because it shouldn't be that any additional over and above the legislative requirements are placed on any applicant, whoever they are. I think you raised an important point about the Cabinet report and other forums in which the project is being separately looked at. But in terms of the planning committee's remit, it's about the planning application, or in this instance, the listed building application. And obviously, we've outlined why we haven't put a condition on with regards to requirements about asbestos, because of the very specific legislation that deals with this and not replicating that. Government guidance is very clear about not replicating things in other legislation. So that's why we haven't. So that's obviously what the recommendation is in front of you with the conditions that we've got. I do think an informative, though, again, it's just simply flagging up there as a requirement. I would suggest, though, that it's known. It's, again, you know, it's known by the people on site. In terms of additional information that the council as a separate entity might hold about it, that's a separate matter outside of planning in terms of what we do and don't have about that issue that could be found. I mean, obviously, you've mentioned there's a reference to a report. I would assume that all of those reports have been provided to any developer of a site if we are the freeholder. But again, it's not relevant to planning committee whether or not that has or has not happened. Was there another point? Yeah.
Yeah, on the point you've mentioned about the use with the nursery and everything else, obviously that's not being considered through this application. We're not looking at uses. But obviously what's been raised, I will make sure I go back to the applicants for the full application and make sure we get that information for that application when it's brought before members at the next committee.
The other thing I would maybe ask or suggest is, it's such a big site, it's so complicated that I would, and you know, I'm sure applications are going to come backwards and forwards over the next few years. I'd actually really quite like a site visit so that we can put in context the building, because it does look as if a fabulous job is going to be done, but it would be really, really nice to actually see the site as it's laid out, and some of the additions clearly are massive improvements. And even you know, historic buildings need to evolve over time, so I don't see some of the issues at the top as being a big issue based on flat images that we have here. But I would welcome a visit.
Now, Councillor Packman, you've spoken already. Are you adding anything, or anybody else wish to make any points, or shall we move to vote on?
I just wanted to come back on Councillor Wing's point around the site visit. I think the site visit is for the next application, because I think it's important to separate the nursery and the alcoholic areas and things like that. But that's for later on. And I quite welcome the, what did you call it? The reminder? Informative. I really welcome the informative, because I think Mr. Leverson's right that we shouldn't be duplicating legislation, but we should be making a very strong point that what's been brought to committee tonight.
I think what perhaps we should consider is when we have the full application with all the details, a site visit. So bearing in mind that we have agreed to go on, but does anybody else have anything else they wish to add at this point, or shall we put the officer's motion for approval, which is as exactly what we've got in front of us? So if I could ask the clerk to activate, thank you. Thank you very much. I will now hand back to the...
Well, no, it's
you
call on the clerk now.
Oh, yeah. All right, then. I now call on Charles. What, to read that?
Yeah, read that.
That concludes the public speaking for this meeting. I'm going to call upon the clerk to read out the remaining planning applications. If anybody wishes to reserve an application, will you please call out as the clerk reads it. Thank you. We're just waiting for the chair to come back from the members' room. I don't think she's snuck home. No, she hasn't. She's... Councillor Critton, you can come back up here for the last bit. No, come on.
Okay, thank you. As has been said, that concludes the public speaking for the meeting, and I will call upon the clerk to read out the remaining planning applications. If a member wishes to reserve an application, will they please call out as the clerk reads? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We have AO3, land at Port of Ramsgate, Royal Harbour Approach in Ramsgate. AO5, 146 High Street in Ramsgate. AO6, former Customs Shed West Crosswall in Ramsgate. AO7, 26 Ethelbert Crescent in Margate. AO8, 90 Trinity Square Market. And lastly, AO9, 11 Anson Close and 19 Hornet Close in Broadstairs.
Thank you. Can I have a proposer to move that the applications that have not been reserved be determined in accordance with the officer's recommendations? Councillor Matterface and a seconder, Councillor Linda Wright. And over to the electronic voting, please. Thank you. The motion is carried. I will now hand back over to the clerk. For the benefit of the public, I will call upon the clerk to read out the applications that have been determined.
Thank you again, Chair. We have AO3 land at Port of Ramsgate, Royal Harbour Approach in Ramsgate. AO5, 146 High Street in Ramsgate. AO6, former Customs Shed, West Crosswall in Ramsgate. AO7, 26 Ethelbert Crescent in Margate. AO8, 90 Trinity Square in Margate. AO9, 11 Ansam Close and 19 Hornet Close in Broadstairs.
Thank you. And that concludes the business for the meeting. So thank everyone for their attendance.